At Christmas, my mother-in-law proudly introduced a new woman to my husband. I smiled sweetly. By the way, the house is in my name, not his. The room froze. My name is Emily, and until 8 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage to Liam Turner. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4, and I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful together. How naive I was. The warning signs had been there for months, but I'd attributed them to work stress. Liam worked as a financial advisor at his father's firm, Turner & Associates, while I ran my own successful marketing consultancy from our home office. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in his appearance. I should have connected the dots sooner. It wasn't until I accidentally saw a text notification on his phone while he was in the shower that everything clicked into place. See you tomorrow night. Can't wait to finally meet your family. P says you've told them we're just friends for now. The message was from someone named Lily. My blood ran cold when I realized P meant Helen, his mother. Helen Turner had never liked me. From the moment Liam brought me home to meet his family, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She'd wanted him to marry Chelsea Morrison, the daughter of another wealthy family in their social circle. When Liam chose me instead, a middle-class girl who'd worked her way through college and built her own business, Helen never forgave it either of us. But I never imagined she'd stoop to orchestrating an affair. Over the next 8 weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I hired a private investigator named Jason Lee, who confirmed my worst fears. Liam had been seeing Lily Harris for 3 months. She was a 25-year-old real estate agent who'd recently moved to town, and according to Jason's research, Helen had introduced them at a charity gala I'd skipped due to a client emergency. The photos Jason showed me were devastating. Liam and Lily at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands while walking through the park where he proposed to me, kissing in the parking lot of the gym where we had a joint membership. But the most infuriating part was discovering that Helen was actively encouraging the relationship, even hosting dinner parties where Lily played the role of Liam's girlfriend while I was supposedly away on business trips that didn't actually exist. As heartbroken as I was, I'm also incredibly practical. Instead of confronting Liam immediately, I started planning. My father had taught me chess when I was 7, and his favorite saying was, "Never make a move until you can see the whole board." It was time to study the board very carefully. First, I reviewed every legal document related to our marriage and assets. When we got engaged, my lawyer had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Liam had been offended initially, but I'd explained that, as a business owner, I needed to protect my company and personal assets. The prenup was ironclad. What was mine remained mine, and what was his remained his. More importantly, the house we lived in, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial that Helen always bragged about to her friends, was purchased entirely with my money and remained solely in my name. Next, I documented everything. Every business expense Liam had charged to our joint account, every client dinner that was actually a date with Lily, every lie he told me about his whereabouts. I kept our joint accounts active, but started monitoring every transaction in real time through banking apps, screenshotting everything for evidence. I created a detailed spreadsheet that would make any accountant proud. Then I started making strategic moves. I quietly opened new personal accounts and began redirecting my business income there while maintaining just enough in our joint accounts to avoid suspicion. I scheduled a meeting with my divorce attorney, Sophia Diaz, who'd handled my business contracts for years. I updated my will and all my insurance policies. I even had the locks changed on my office space downtown where I'd been considering moving my business full-time. But most importantly, I planned the perfect reveal. Helen had always insisted on hosting elaborate holiday celebrations. Thanksgiving had been uncomfortable with Liam acting distant and Helen making pointed comments about young couples growing apart and finding happiness in unexpected places. But Christmas was her crown jewel event, a formal dinner party for 30 of their closest friends and family members. When Helen called to confirm our attendance, her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Oh, Emily darling, I hope you don't mind, but I've invited a lovely young woman named Lily to join us. She's new in town and doesn't have family nearby. You know how I hate for anyone to be alone during the holidays." I could hear the smugness in her voice, the barely contained excitement. She thought she was cornering me, forcing me to watch my husband's mistress play house at their family celebration. What she didn't realize was that she was giving me the perfect stage for my own performance. The week before Christmas, I went shopping, not for gifts, but for the perfect outfit for the dinner. I chose a stunning red dress that Liam had always loved, paired with a diamond jewelry he'd given me for our anniversary. I wanted to look absolutely radiant when their world came crashing down. I also made one final preparation. I called my brother Jack and my best friend Olivia, asking them to be on standby. I didn't tell them everything, but I hinted that I might need support after Christmas dinner. Both promised to keep their phones close. Christmas Day arrived crisp and clear. Liam was unusually attentive that morning, bringing me coffee in bed and commenting on how beautiful I looked. I wondered if his conscience was bothering him or if Helen had coached him to be extra sweet before they blindsided me with their surprise. We arrived at the Turner family estate at exactly 6:30. The house was decorated like something from a magazine with twinkling lights and perfect garland draped over every surface. Helen greeted us at the door, wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Emily, darling, you look lovely," she said, kissing my cheek with all the warmth of a snake. "Come in. Come in. Everyone's dying to see you both." The living room was filled with the usual suspects. Liam's father, George, his sister, Rachel, and her husband Chris, various aunts, uncles and cousins, and several family friends I'd known for years. But sitting prominently on the sofa next to Helen's usual spot was a young woman I'd never seen in person, though I'd studied enough surveillance photos to recognize her immediately. Lily Harris was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, blonde, and polished to perfection. She wore a cream-colored dress that was clearly expensive but appropriately modest for a family dinner. When she saw Liam, her face lit up in a way that might have been heartbreaking if I hadn't been prepared for it. "Liam," Helen called out. "Come meet Lily. I've told her so much about you." I watched my husband's performance with grudging admiration. He managed to look surprised and pleased while shaking Lily's hand, holding it just a fraction longer than necessary. "Lily, what a pleasure. Mom mentioned you were new in town." "Yes, I moved here from Boston about 8 months ago," Lily replied, her voice warm and friendly. "Your mother has been so welcoming. She's told me wonderful things about the whole family." I stood there smiling, playing the role of the devoted wife. While my marriage disintegrated in front of me, several people tried to include me in the conversation, but I could feel the undercurrent of anticipation in the room. Helen's closest friends, women who'd always treated me with polite disdain, were watching me with barely concealed excitement. Dinner was called at 8 o'clock, and Helen had clearly orchestrated the seating arrangement. Liam was positioned directly across from Lily, with me relegated to the far end of the table between his elderly Uncle Jack and his cousin's wife Karen, who'd always been kind to me. The conversation flowed around topics I'd heard 1,000 times before. George's latest golf tournament, Rachel's children's accomplishments, the family's upcoming vacation to the Bahamas. But I could feel the tension building as Helen kept steering the conversation back to Lily, praising her career, her education, her family background. "Lily graduated from Harvard Business School," Helen announced during the salad course. "Just like our Liam. They have so much in common." "How interesting," I replied smoothly, meeting Lily's eyes across the table. "Business school must have been quite an experience. I went straight from undergraduate to starting my own company, so I sometimes wonder what I missed." Lily smiled politely. "Oh, there's nothing wrong with learning through experience. Mom mentioned you have your own marketing firm." "That's right. We specialize in crisis management and reputation recovery. It's amazing how quickly a solid reputation can be destroyed and how much work it takes to rebuild trust once it's broken." Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Helen pressed on. "Lily works in real estate. She's already one of the top agents in her firm." "Real estate can be such a relationship-based business," I observed. "Trust is everything, isn't it? Clients need to know their agent has their best interests at heart, not some hidden agenda." The conversation continued through the main course, with Helen becoming increasingly bold in her praise of Lily, and increasingly pointed in her comments about young people finding their true paths and life taking unexpected turns. During the beef Wellington course, I noticed Lily stealing glances at Liam when she thought no one was looking. There was genuine affection in her eyes, which almost made me feel sorry for her. She had no idea she was being used as a pawn in Helen's chess game, just as much as I was. "Lily, tell us about your family," Helen prompted, clearly steering toward another rehearsed talking point. "I understand your father is in finance as well." "Yes, he's a portfolio manager in Boston," Lily replied, unconsciously straightening her posture. "He actually went to Harvard Business School too, about 20 years before Liam." "Did? How wonderful," Helen exclaimed as if this was the most delightful coincidence in the world. "Liam, didn't you say you were thinking about expanding the firm's investment services?" Liam nodded, playing his part perfectly. "We've been considering it. It would be helpful to have someone with that kind of background on the team." I watched this performance with growing fascination. They clearly planned this conversation, probably rehearsed it multiple times. Helen was systematically establishing Lily's credentials, her family connections, her potential value to the Turner family business. It was like watching a job interview disguised as small talk. "And Lily, you mentioned you're originally from Connecticut?" George asked, seemingly oblivious to his wife's machinations. "That's right, Greenwich. My family has a place on the water there. Nothing too fancy, just a little cottage we've had for generations." I nearly choked on my wine. A little cottage in Greenwich that had been in the family for generations, probably cost more than most people's houses. Helen's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. She found herself a daughter-in-law with both money and pedigree. "How lovely," I interjected smoothly. "Greenwich is beautiful. Liam and I looked at properties there when we first got married, but we decided we preferred being closer to the city for work purposes." It was a subtle reminder that Liam and I had made joint decisions about our life together, but I could see Helen filing it away as evidence of my practical, unromantic nature. "Emily's always been very focused on convenience over beauty," Helen said with a tight smile. "It's admirable really how dedicated she is to her work." The backhanded compliment hung in the air like smoke. Several people around the table shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the subtle dig, even if they weren't sure how to respond to it. "I've always believed that loving what you do makes you better at everything else in life," I replied evenly. "When you're fulfilled professionally, you have more energy and enthusiasm to bring to your personal relationships." Lily smiled genuinely at this. "I completely agree. I love real estate because I get to help people find their dream homes. There's something so satisfying about matching the right person with the right property." "How do you determine what makes a property right for someone?" Liam asked, and I could hear the flirtation in his voice, even if others might have missed it. "Well," Lily said, warming to the topic, "you have to really listen to what they're saying, and what they're not saying. Sometimes people think they want one thing, but what they really need is something completely different." The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with my dessert fork. Lily was unknowingly describing exactly what Helen had done to her, convinced her she wanted Liam when what she really needed was to run as far away from this family as possible. "That sounds like quite a skill," Rachel commented. "I imagine you have to be very perceptive about people's motivations." "You do," Lily agreed. "Unfortunately, not everyone is honest about what they want or what their situation really is. I've had clients lie about their budget, their timeline, even their relationship status. It makes the job much more challenging." Liam went very still at this comment, and I saw Helen's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Lily had just unknowingly described her own situation perfectly. She was being lied to about Liam's relationship status, his timeline, and his true motivations. "Honesty is so important in any relationship," I said, looking directly at Lily. "Professional or personal. Once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild." "Absolutely," Lily said earnestly. "I always tell my clients that we can work through almost any challenge as long as we're honest with each other from the start." The conversation was becoming almost surreal. Lily kept making points that undermined her own position without realizing it. While Liam grew more and more uncomfortable, and Helen worked harder to steer things back to safer topics. "Lily, you must tell us about that lovely property you sold last month," Helen interjected quickly. "The one with the gorgeous gardens." But before Lily could answer, Uncle Jack, who'd been quietly working his way through his third glass of wine, spoke up. "You know, this whole conversation reminds me of when I was in real estate years ago. Had this client once who was married, but told everyone he was single. Caused quite a mess when the truth came out." The table fell silent except for the soft clink of silverware against china. Jack, bless his heart, continued obliviously. "Fellow thought he was being clever, keeping his wife in the dark while he shopped for a love nest with his girlfriend. But the girlfriend found out about the wife. The wife found out about the girlfriend, and both women ended up owning pieces of him in the divorce settlement." Helen, clearly embarrassed, said sharply, "Perhaps we should discuss something more pleasant." "Oh, it turned out quite pleasant in the end," Jack continued cheerfully. "The wife took him for everything he was worth. The girlfriend realized she'd dodged a bullet, and both women ended up much happier without him. Funny how these things work out sometimes." I raised my wineglass slightly in Jack's direction. "To justice being served," I said quietly, but not so quietly that the table couldn't hear me. Lily was looking increasingly uncomfortable, though I wasn't sure if she understood why Jack's story was relevant. Liam, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. "Well," Helen said brightly, clearly desperate to change the subject. "Shall we move on to dessert?" I made my famous chocolate torte. As Helen bustled around serving dessert, I caught Karen, the cousin's wife, beside me, giving me a meaningful look. She leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay, honey? You seem a little tense tonight." I smiled at her gratefully. Karen had always been observant and kind, never part of Helen's inner circle, but always trying to smooth over family tensions. "I'm fine," I whispered back, just enjoying the family dynamics. Karen studied my face for a moment, then glanced around the table. I could see understanding dawning in her eyes as she took in Helen's obvious matchmaking efforts, Liam's discomfort, and Lily's innocent participation in what was clearly a setup. "Oh my," Karen breathed quietly. "Emily, do you need?" "I've got it handled," I assured her softly. "But thank you." Karen squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her kindness. It reminded me that not everyone in this family was complicit in Helen's schemes. The chocolate torte was admittedly delicious. Helen might be a master manipulator, but she was also an excellent cook. I found myself savoring each bite, knowing it would likely be the last time I'd taste her famous dessert. "This is incredible, Mrs. Turner," Lily said enthusiastically. "Would you be willing to share the recipe?" "Oh, it's a family recipe," Helen replied with false modesty. "I only share it with family members." The implication was clear. Once Lily married Liam and I was out of the picture, she'd be worthy of the precious torte recipe. It was such a petty little power play, but it perfectly encapsulated everything that was wrong with Helen's worldview. "That's a shame," I said conversationally. "I've been asking for that recipe for 8 years. I guess I never quite made it into the inner circle." The comment was light enough to seem like a joke, but pointed enough to make several people uncomfortable. Rachel looked mortified. George frowned at his wife, and even Lily seemed to sense the underlying tension. "Emily, you know that's not," Helen started. But I held up my hand. "It's fine, Helen. I understand. Some things are reserved for blood relatives and future daughters-in-law." The emphasis on future was subtle but unmistakable. Lily looked confused, glancing between Helen and me as if trying to understand why a recipe was causing such tension. It was then, as I watched Lily's genuine bewilderment and saw Helen's satisfied smirk, that I realized the full extent of the cruelty in this situation. Helen wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was using Lily to do it, all while keeping Lily in the dark about her true role in the scheme. Lily thought she was at a family dinner making friends. She had no idea she was the weapon Helen was wielding against me. That realization crystallized my resolve. When Helen made her grand announcement, I would make sure Lily understood exactly how she'd been used, not to hurt her, but to free her from Helen's manipulation. It was during dessert that Helen finally made her move. "This is Lily," Helen announced proudly, raising her wine glass and gesturing toward the blonde beside her. "She'll be perfect for Liam after the divorce." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Every conversation stopped. Uncle Jack nearly dropped his fork. Rachel gasped audibly. Even George, who'd clearly not been informed of his wife's plan, looked stunned. But I was ready. I calmly buttered my roll, taking my time to spread it evenly, while every eye in the room focused on me. Then I looked up with my brightest smile. "How nice," I said sweetly, turning to Lily. "Did they mention that the house Liam and I live in is in my name, and that there's a prenup in place protecting every single asset that matters?" Liam went completely still, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips, his face draining of color as he realized the trap they'd walked into. Lily's confident smile faltered as she looked between Helen and Liam, confusion replacing her earlier composure. But I wasn't done. "I'm curious, Lily," I continued, my voice conversational and friendly. "When exactly did you and Liam start your relationship? Was it before or after the charity gala in June where Helen introduced you?" The color drained from Lily's face. I'm not sure what you're implying." "Oh, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts like the fact that you've been seeing my husband for 3 months, or that you've been to dinner at Marcello's 7 times together. They have excellent security cameras, by the way. Or that Helen has been hosting cozy little dinner parties where you play house while I'm supposedly out of town." Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Emily, I don't know what you think you know, but what I know," I interrupted, reaching into my purse and pulling out a manila folder, "is that I have a private investigator who's very thorough in his work. Would you like to see the photos, Helen? Or should I just tell everyone about the time you told Lily that once Liam divorced me, she'd be living in the big house and wouldn't have to worry about money anymore?" The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the soft clink of ice in someone's water glass, the barely audible gasp from Rachel. Liam finally found his voice. "Emily, please. Let's not do this here. Why not here? I asked, genuinely curious. This is where your mother chose to humiliate me in front of your entire family. This is where she thought she'd force me to sit quietly while she introduced your replacement. So this seems like the perfect place to set the record straight. I stood up, smoothing my red dress, and addressed the room like I was giving a business presentation. For those of you who are wondering, yes, Liam has been having an affair. Yes, Helen orchestrated it. And yes, they've been planning to divorce me so Liam can marry Lily and live in what Helen calls the big house. I turned back to Lily, who looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The thing is, Lily, that big house, I bought it with my money before Liam and I got married. And according to our prenuptial agreement, it remains mine regardless of what happens to our marriage. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Liam told me you were separated. He said you were just waiting to make it official after the holidays. Did he also tell you about the joint account he's been using to pay for your dates? The one that I've been monitoring every transaction, or that the business trips I've been taking that gave you time alone were fictional? Liam stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. That's enough, Emily. Is it? I asked. Because I don't think I've covered everything yet. Should I mention that you've been telling Lily I'm emotionally distant and we haven't been intimate in months? Because that's interesting considering we were together 2 nights ago. Lily made us sound like a wounded animal and looked at Liam with betrayal in her eyes. You said you were sleeping in the guest room. You said you hadn't. That you two weren't. He lied, I said simply. About a lot of things. It turns out Helen finally found her voice again. But it came out as a screech. How dare you come into my home and make these accusations? Liam deserves better than someone who cares more about business than her own marriage. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Liam does deserve better. He deserves someone who's honest with him. Someone who doesn't orchestrate affairs behind his back. Someone who doesn't manipulate him into betraying his wife. I looked around the room at the shocked faces of people who had known me for 7 years. For those of you who are wondering what happens now, I've already prepared divorce papers. They'll be filed tomorrow morning, but I wanted everyone to know the truth first. Marie, the cousin's wife beside me, reached over and squeezed my hand. Emily, honey, I'm so sorry. Thank you, I said genuinely. I appreciate that, and I want everyone to know that this wasn't a decision I made lightly. I tried to save my marriage. I tried to figure out what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed as a wife. I looked directly at Liam, who was staring at his plate like it might offer him an escape route. But then I realized I hadn't failed at anything. I'd been loyal, supportive, and loving for 7 years. I built a successful business while supporting my husband's career. And I tried to build relationships with his family, even when they made it clear I wasn't welcome. Helen started to object, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. You see, the thing about having your own business in crisis management is that you learn to plan for every contingency. So, while Liam was planning his new life with Lily, I was planning to. I reached into my folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. These are copies of every transaction Liam made using our joint accounts for his dates with Lily. Restaurants, gifts, even the hotel room you two used last weekend while I was supposedly visiting my sister. Lily buried her face in her hands. Liam looked like he was going to be sick. The total comes to $12,000 over 3 months, I continued, which according to our prenup constitutes financial infidelity and gives me grounds to pursue additional damages. George finally spoke up, his voice gruff with embarrassment. Emily, perhaps we should discuss this privately. With respect, George, there's nothing private about it anymore. Your wife made sure of that when she invited Lily to publicly humiliate me. I turned to Lily one final time. I don't blame you entirely, Lily. Liam is very charming when he wants to be, and Helen can be very convincing, but you should know that the man you thought you were in love with has been lying to both of us. Lily looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I really thought Liam said, you two were already separated. She showed me pictures of Liam looking miserable and said, you were cold and career-obsessed. I'm sure she did, I replied gently. Helen's never approved of me. But Lily, think about this. If Liam was willing to lie to me for 5 months, if he was willing to use our joint money to wine and dine you, if he was willing to let his mother orchestrate an affair rather than having an honest conversation with his wife about problems in our marriage, what does that tell you about his character? The room was so quiet I could hear the furnace kicking on in the basement. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. Emily, I don't know what to say. I had no idea any of this was happening. I know, I said, my voice softer now. Most of you didn't. and I don't hold that against anyone. But I needed you all to know the truth before you started hearing Helen's version of events. I gathered my purse and my folder, preparing to leave. The divorce will be final in 2 months. Liam can stay in the house until then, but after that, he'll need to find somewhere else to live. I'll be moving my business to my downtown office full-time, so I won't be working from home anymore. Liam finally looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with. Emily, please. Can't we talk about this? Can't we try to work it out? Work what out? I asked. Liam, the lies, the cheating. The fact that your mother has been actively sabotaging our marriage for 5 months while you went along with it. He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. Actually, don't answer that because here's what I've realized over the past few. At Christmas, my mother-in-law proudly introduced a new woman to my husband. I smiled sweetly. By the way, the house is in my name, not his. The room froze. My name is Emily, and until 8 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage to Liam Turner. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 4, and I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful together. How naive I was. The warning signs had been there for months, but I'd attributed them to work stress. Liam worked as a financial advisor at his father's firm, Turner & Associates, while I ran my own successful marketing consultancy from our home office. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in his appearance. I should have connected the dots sooner. It wasn't until I accidentally saw a text notification on his phone while he was in the shower that everything clicked into place. See you tomorrow night. Can't wait to finally meet your family. P says you've told them we're just friends for now. The message was from someone named Lily. My blood ran cold when I realized P meant Helen, his mother. Helen Turner had never liked me. From the moment Liam brought me home to meet his family, she made it clear I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She'd wanted him to marry Chelsea Morrison, the daughter of another wealthy family in their social circle. When Liam chose me instead, a middle-class girl who'd worked her way through college and built her own business, Helen never forgave it either of us. But I never imagined she'd stoop to orchestrating an affair. Over the next 8 weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I hired a private investigator named Jason Lee, who confirmed my worst fears. Liam had been seeing Lily Harris for 3 months. She was a 25-year-old real estate agent who'd recently moved to town, and according to Jason's research, Helen had introduced them at a charity gala I'd skipped due to a client emergency. The photos Jason showed me were devastating. Liam and Lily at restaurants I'd never been to, holding hands while walking through the park where he proposed to me, kissing in the parking lot of the gym where we had a joint membership. But the most infuriating part was discovering that Helen was actively encouraging the relationship, even hosting dinner parties where Lily played the role of Liam's girlfriend while I was supposedly away on business trips that didn't actually exist. As heartbroken as I was, I'm also incredibly practical. Instead of confronting Liam immediately, I started planning. My father had taught me chess when I was 7, and his favorite saying was, "Never make a move until you can see the whole board." It was time to study the board very carefully. First, I reviewed every legal document related to our marriage and assets. When we got engaged, my lawyer had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Liam had been offended initially, but I'd explained that, as a business owner, I needed to protect my company and personal assets. The prenup was ironclad. What was mine remained mine, and what was his remained his. More importantly, the house we lived in, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial that Helen always bragged about to her friends, was purchased entirely with my money and remained solely in my name. Next, I documented everything. Every business expense Liam had charged to our joint account, every client dinner that was actually a date with Lily, every lie he told me about his whereabouts. I kept our joint accounts active, but started monitoring every transaction in real time through banking apps, screenshotting everything for evidence. I created a detailed spreadsheet that would make any accountant proud. Then I started making strategic moves. I quietly opened new personal accounts and began redirecting my business income there while maintaining just enough in our joint accounts to avoid suspicion. I scheduled a meeting with my divorce attorney, Sophia Diaz, who'd handled my business contracts for years. I updated my will and all my insurance policies. I even had the locks changed on my office space downtown where I'd been considering moving my business full-time. But most importantly, I planned the perfect reveal. Helen had always insisted on hosting elaborate holiday celebrations. Thanksgiving had been uncomfortable with Liam acting distant and Helen making pointed comments about young couples growing apart and finding happiness in unexpected places. But Christmas was her crown jewel event, a formal dinner party for 30 of their closest friends and family members. When Helen called to confirm our attendance, her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Oh, Emily darling, I hope you don't mind, but I've invited a lovely young woman named Lily to join us. She's new in town and doesn't have family nearby. You know how I hate for anyone to be alone during the holidays." I could hear the smugness in her voice, the barely contained excitement. She thought she was cornering me, forcing me to watch my husband's mistress play house at their family celebration. What she didn't realize was that she was giving me the perfect stage for my own performance. The week before Christmas, I went shopping, not for gifts, but for the perfect outfit for the dinner. I chose a stunning red dress that Liam had always loved, paired with a diamond jewelry he'd given me for our anniversary. I wanted to look absolutely radiant when their world came crashing down. I also made one final preparation. I called my brother Jack and my best friend Olivia, asking them to be on standby. I didn't tell them everything, but I hinted that I might need support after Christmas dinner. Both promised to keep their phones close. Christmas Day arrived crisp and clear. Liam was unusually attentive that morning, bringing me coffee in bed and commenting on how beautiful I looked. I wondered if his conscience was bothering him or if Helen had coached him to be extra sweet before they blindsided me with their surprise. We arrived at the Turner family estate at exactly 6:30. The house was decorated like something from a magazine with twinkling lights and perfect garland draped over every surface. Helen greeted us at the door, wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Emily darling, you look lovely," she said, kissing my cheek with all the warmth of a snake. Come in. Come in. Everyone's dying to see you both." The living room was filled with the usual suspects. Liam's father, George, his sister, Rachel, and her husband Chris, various aunts, uncles and cousins, and several family friends I'd known for years. But sitting prominently on the sofa next to Helen's usual spot was a young woman I'd never seen in person, though I'd studied enough surveillance photos to recognize her immediately. Lily Harris was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, blonde, and polished to perfection. She wore a cream-colored dress that was clearly expensive but appropriately modest for a family dinner. When she saw Liam, her face lit up in a way that might have been heartbreaking if I hadn't been prepared for it. "Liam," Helen called out. "Come meet Lily. I've told her so much about you." I watched my husband's performance with grudging admiration. He managed to look surprised and pleased while shaking Lily's hand, holding it just a fraction longer than necessary. "Lily, what a pleasure. Mom mentioned you were new in town." "Yes, I moved here from Boston about 8 months ago," Lily replied, her voice warm and friendly. "Your mother has been so welcoming. She's told me wonderful things about the whole family." I stood there smiling, playing the role of the devoted wife. While my marriage disintegrated in front of me, several people tried to include me in the conversation, but I could feel the undercurrent of anticipation in the room. Helen's closest friends, women who'd always treated me with polite disdain, were watching me with barely concealed excitement. Dinner was called at 8 o'clock, and Helen had clearly orchestrated the seating arrangement. Liam was positioned directly across from Lily, with me relegated to the far end of the table between his elderly Uncle Jack and his cousin's wife Karen, who'd always been kind to me. The conversation flowed around topics I'd heard 1,000 times before. George's latest golf tournament, Rachel's children's accomplishments, the family's upcoming vacation to the Bahamas. But I could feel the tension building as Helen kept steering the conversation back to Lily, praising her career, her education, her family background. "Lily graduated from Harvard Business School," Helen announced during the salad course. "Just like our Liam. They have so much in common." "How interesting," I replied smoothly, meeting Lily's eyes across the table. Business school must have been quite an experience. I went straight from undergraduate to starting my own company, so I sometimes wonder what I missed. Lily smiled politely. "Oh, there's nothing wrong with learning through experience. Mom mentioned you have your own marketing firm." "That's right. We specialize in crisis management and reputation recovery. It's amazing how quickly a solid reputation can be destroyed and how much work it takes to rebuild trust once it's broken." Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Helen pressed on. "Lily works in real estate. She's already one of the top agents in her firm." "Real estate can be such a relationship-based business," I observed. "Trust is everything, isn't it? Clients need to know their agent has their best interests at heart, not some hidden agenda." The conversation continued through the main course, with Helen becoming increasingly bold in her praise of Lily, and increasingly pointed in her comments about young people finding their true paths and life taking unexpected turns. During the beef Wellington course, I noticed Lily stealing glances at Liam when she thought no one was looking. There was genuine affection in her eyes, which almost made me feel sorry for her. She had no idea she was being used as a pawn in Helen's chess game, just as much as I was. Lily, tell us about your family, Helen prompted, clearly steering toward another rehearsed talking point. I understand your father is in finance as well. Yes, he's a portfolio manager in Boston, Lily replied, unconsciously straightening her posture. He actually went to Harvard Business School too, about 20 years before Liam. Did? How wonderful, Helen exclaimed as if this was the most delightful coincidence in the world. Liam, didn't you say you were thinking about expanding the firm's investment services? Liam nodded, playing his part perfectly. We've been considering it. It would be helpful to have someone with that kind of background on the team. I watched this performance with growing fascination. They clearly planned this conversation, probably rehearsed it multiple times. Helen was systematically establishing Lily's credentials, her family connections, her potential value to the Turner family business. It was like watching a job interview disguised as small talk. And after 9 years building my father's company, he handed it to my 25-year-old nephew. Months later, the empire was in ashes, and they begged me back. I've always considered myself to be a well-organized man. But now, I've begun to doubt everything. Let me set the situation for everyone. This all started during my father's 58th birthday celebration, and it seemed like my life was turned upside down in a moment. For reference, I've been working for my father's firm for the past 9 years. After 9 years of effort, working, and establishing the business, I believed I was set. I expected to inherit the firm one day, as any devoted family member would. After putting in the effort, it was a pretty enormous celebration. We had friends, relatives, business partners, you name it. My parents enjoy a good celebration, and today was no exception. Drinks were flowing, the food was delicious, and everyone appeared to be having a fantastic time. Then came the time my father stood up to make a toast. I expected it to be the usual. A few of jokes, a sincere thank you, and maybe a little something about how much he was looking forward to retirement. But then he made the announcement. I'm happy to say that after much thought and discussion, I'm ready to retire in a few months, and I've decided to pass the torch of CEO to someone who I think will take the company to new heights. My grandson, Aaron Miller. I sighed. I believed I had misheard him. Aaron is a grandson. The youngster is 25, has just graduated from business school, and has no real-world experience. And yet, he is the one taking over the firm to which I have committed more than a decade of my life. The clapping and congratulations around the room were like daggers. My heart was racing, and my stomach felt as if it was about to burst. I tried to seem calm, but inwardly, I was angry. Don't get me wrong, I don't detest Aaron. He's a nice enough kid when you talk to him at family gatherings, but he's young and inexperienced. He has absolutely no idea how to operate a corporation. And I can say this with confidence because I've been running it for several years. Aaron just has a fancy degree and my parents' mistaken confidence. I, on the other hand, had put years of blood, sweat and tears in this business, but it didn't seem to matter much. Everyone resumed socializing after the toast, but I couldn't keep up. My wife came over to check on me, and she must have thought I'd seen a ghost because she inquired what was wrong right away. I just shook my head and told her we'd discuss it later. I needed time to find out what the heck I was doing. Later that night, after the visitors had departed and the house was quiet, I faced my father alone. I was hoping he'd explain it was only a formality, or that I'd still be substantially involved, something to excuse this ridiculous decision. But instead, he doubled down. He informed me that Aaron was the best candidate because he was young, full of new ideas, and had a degree. A friggin' degree. Meanwhile, for more than a decade, I had been in charge of developing client connections, managing the staff, and overseeing day-to-day operations. He even had the nerve to add, you can still work with him, mentor him, show him the ropes. That was it for me. I told him right then that I couldn't remain. I couldn't imagine working for Aaron after everything I'd done for the firm. It wasn't even about the money or the championship at that stage. It was a principle. I had earned the post. I earned it. And being informed I wasn't even considered felt like a smack in the face. A brewer. The following several days were a haze. My parents attempted to talk me out of resigning, telling me I was overreacting and that I should think about the family, but I couldn't see it any other way. If they didn't regard my work enough to offer me the position I'd been striving for, I didn't see the sense in sticking. So I submitted my resignation, packed my office, and went away. Walking out of that workplace for the last time was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done. I had spent so many years there. I knew every inch of that area, both good and terrible. It wasn't just a job for me. It was part of my existence. Leaving was like severing a limb, but I knew I had to. Staying would have been much worse. My wife was wonderfully supportive during this. She said she respected my decision and was proud of me for advocating for myself. She understood how much this upset me, but she also realized I couldn't stay in an environment where I wasn't appreciated. That support meant everything to me since it seemed like the rest of my family was against me. My mother continued phoning, urging me to reconsider. My father even came up at my place unexpectedly one day to attempt to persuade me to come back, but every time they inquired, my response was the same. No, Ibru. The most difficult element of all of this was the sense of betrayal. My father and I used to be close, particularly when we initially began the firm. I gave up my own profession to assist him pursue his goal. And it seemed like he was tossing me away. And for what? Some believed Aaron was the future just because he had a degree. It did not make sense. After I departed, I did not hear from Aaron directly. I'm not sure if he wanted the post, or if he just agreed because my parents pushed. It didn't matter. The harm was done. My parents had made their decision, and now I had to make mine. The first several weeks after quitting were challenging. I kept repeating the talk with my father in my mind, wondering what I might have said or done better. But every time I arrived to the same conclusion, I made the correct decision. I could not have stayed and watched Aaron stumble his way through operating the company while I stood on the sidelines, biting my tongue. It wasn't only about me anymore. It was about my self-esteem. So, 4 months later, I'm still trying to stitch my life back together. I've been keeping my distance from my family while working out my future actions, and, as much as it hurts to admit it, I believe leaving away was the finest decision I could have made. If they couldn't perceive my worth, I had no reason to stay. After I resigned, I planned to leave the family company forever. I did not want to think about it, hear about it, or be reminded of its existence. But life does not operate that way, especially when what you're attempting to forget is related to your family. Despite my best efforts, I continued hearing about the firm and Aaron's awful leadership. At start, it was minor stuff. My friend who still worked there texted me, "Dude, Aaron just fired 3 senior employees because they didn't vibe with his vision." My immediate reaction was to chuckle, not because it was amusing, but because it was so inevitable. Aaron had no idea what he was doing. Those staff had been with us since the beginning and were intimately familiar with the firm. Losing them was like to chopping off a limb and expecting to run a marathon. Next, I learned that he was making some significant modifications to our contracts. I'm all for innovation, but Aaron was jeopardizing long-standing agreements. Relationships I had painstakingly constructed and cultivated. Clients began to walk away, dissatisfied and puzzled. And yet, my parents stood by him. "He's just adjusting," my mother told a mutual acquaintance. "It's all part of the process." Okay, fine. The process of tanking a corporation. A Braftoft. Then came the real kicker. Financial fraud. I don't know all the facts since I don't want to go into them, but from what I can tell, Aaron tried to exaggerate our figures to impress a large customer. A rookie error. The individual probably thought he was being smart, but all he did was raise a large red flag that said, "Audit me." The consequences were swift and severe. The company's reputation was ruined. Clients bailed huge mass and lawsuits began to pile up. Hearing about all of this seemed like watching a train accident in slow motion. On the one hand, I felt justified. I mean, I warned my parents that Aaron was unprepared for the position, but they didn't listen. On the other hand, it was difficult to witness something I had worked so hard to develop fall apart in such a short period of time. I didn't want to care, but I couldn't avoid it. That firm has been my life for 9 years. It was like witnessing someone smash a sledgehammer into a house you created with your own 2 hands. But here's the deal. Nothing in this shocked me. Aaron was never ready to lead. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. I never had to battle for anything. He had an arrogance about him, as if he believed he could go into a room and sort things out as he went. That may work in classroom, but not in the real world. Business is not forgiving. It does not care about your last name or GPA. Aaron was learning the hard way. I, Bree, was not the only one who saw it coming. I started receiving calls and texts from old co-workers, people I hadn't spoken with in months. "Man, we miss you around here," one person said. "It's a shambles without you." Another said, "The place feels like a sinking ship. I don't know how much longer I can stay here." It was flattering, but also heartbreaking. These were folks I'd been working with for years, people who trusted and supported me. Hearing their plight made me want to help, but I knew better than to become involved. I was not about to go in and clean up Aaron's mess. That wasn't my job anymore. What really got me was how my parents handled everything. Instead of holding Aaron responsible, they created excuses for him. "He's under a lot of pressure," my mother remarked when questioned about the fraud allegations. "He simply needs time to regain his feet." Time? The guy had almost destroyed the firm in less than 4 months. How much more time did he need? And don't forget about my sister. She was Aaron's strongest supporter throughout it all, acting as if he was some kind of misunderstood genius. I'm not sure if she was truly crazy or simply too proud to acknowledge she had made a mistake. Whatever the case, it was irritating. She'd campaigned for Aaron to be CEO, persuaded my parents it was the appropriate choice, and now she was doubling down on her stupid judgment. I avoided it for the most part, but one day I couldn't resist. I ran into an old family acquaintance at the grocery store, and they casually commented on how wonderful it must be to see the next generation take over the business. I just smiled and remarked, "Exciting isn't the word I'd use." They laughed, but I was not joking. In some strange sense, witnessing the firm crumble was cathartic. It seemed like all of my irritation and fury at being passed over for Aaron had been vindicated. I was not insane. I was not overreacting. They had made a tremendous mistake, and they were now facing the consequences. However, I did not take pleasure in their failure. I had moved on, or at least tried to. I'd begun to ponder ideas for my own business, something I could start from scratch without the help of others. My wife was really supportive, urging me to take the initiative and accomplish something for myself. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt in charge of my own future. Brew. Meanwhile, my folks were scurrying. Mutual acquaintances informed me that they were working to mitigate the damage and recover client trust. Good luck with it. Once trust has been shattered, it is very tough to regain, particularly in business. And with litigation stacking up, they had more pressing issues to deal with. A Bruin. I had no idea how Aaron was managing things. I hadn't talked to him since I quit, and I honestly didn't want to. But, based on what I heard, he was in over his head. Some said he was still attempting to appear in control, while others thought he was on the point of a collapse. Either way, it wasn't my fault, babe. After 4 months, the corporation was a mere shell of its former self. Clients were gone. Employees were departing in droves, leaving my parents desperate. They hadn't contacted me yet, but I knew it was just a matter of time. And when they did, I knew exactly what I was going to say. 4 months after I left the family company, the unavoidable happened. I'd prepared myself for it, but seeing my parents standing on my porch hit me like a rush of confused emotions. They were older and more agitated than I had ever seen them. My father had an unpleasant rigidity about him, as if he didn't want to be there but knew he couldn't go. My mother, on the other hand, said volumes with her look. Desperation. A burr key. I did not welcome them in immediately away. Honestly, I wanted to shut the door in their faces, but I didn't. "Can we come in?" my father said, his tone uncertain. I stood aside without saying anything, and they shuffled in. The tension in the room was immediate. My wife, who had been in the kitchen, looked at me but did not say anything. She was also expecting this moment. She gently disappeared upstairs, leaving me to cope with the situation. A bros. I sat across from them with arms folded, ready for them to begin. My mom usually jumped in first. "We need your support," she replied, her voice trembling. "The business is..." She stopped, as if speaking it out might make things worse. "It's in trouble. Aaron made some serious mistakes." I didn't answer. I merely gazed at her, letting the stillness linger. It was evident she wanted me to fill the void by stepping in and providing a solution. I did not. Eventually, my father spoke out. "He's in over his head," he confessed, scratching his temple as if he had a headache. "And now the company is facing lawsuits, losing clients, and we're barely hanging on." This was a moment I reflected on many times since I departed. I pictured people coming to me and begging me to mend something, and me laughing in their faces. But now that it was occurring, I was more annoyed than anything. It was neither fulfilling nor validating. It was simply sad. "Ebru, what are you expecting me to do about this?" I eventually asked. My tone was not hostile, but it was not pleasant either. I wanted them to wriggle a bit. They earned it. My mother reached out, laying her hand on mine. You know the business better than anyone, she told me. We need you to come back, please. Abba responded. Her remarks impacted me more than I had anticipated for years. All I wanted was for them to see my worth. To acknowledge that I was the one keeping the firm viable. And now they're virtually asking me to save them. However, it didn't feel like a triumph. It seemed like an insult. Despite this, they still expected me to clean up their mess. Why don't you ask Aaron, I said, moving my hand away. He's the CEO, right? Let him fix it. Ebru can't handle it, my father remarked, annoyance seeping into his voice. We made a mistake. We see that now. But this is bigger than him. It's about the company, about everything we've built. Everything I've built, I clarified. I'm the one who spent 9 years making that company what it is, and you threw me aside like I was nothing. My father groaned deeply, reclining back in his chair. He looked exhausted and discouraged. We thought we were doing the right thing, he joked. We thought Aaron would bring something new to the table. But you were right. He wasn't ready. And now we're paying the price. It should have made me happy to hear him say that, but it did not. It only made me angry. They knew Aaron wasn't prepared. I had informed them repeatedly, but they had not listened. And now they expected me to pick up the pieces. I'm sorry, my mother replied quietly, tears welling in her eyes. We were wrong. We should have trusted you. But it's not too late. You can still fix this. A BR rose up and paced the room. You want me to fix it? I said, my voice rising. You think I can just walk back in there and magically make everything better? Do you even hear yourselves? You didn't trust me before, but now that you're desperate, I'm suddenly good enough. They said nothing, and the quiet just increased my rage. Do you even understand what you're asking? You're asking me to put my life on hold again. To bail you out of a situation you created. And for what? So you can pat me on the back and tell me good job, kid, before throwing me under the bus again. That's not what this is, my father stated firmly. This is about saving the company, saving our legacy. Nay hey bro, not mine, not anymore. Ibarui responded. My mother then began crying, sobbing into her hands. My father merely sat there, gazing at the floor, as if he had no idea what to do. For a moment, I felt guilty. They were my parents after all. But then I recalled the humiliation, the treachery, and the endless evenings I'd spent working late while they were away congratulating Aaron on his high grades. That enraged me more than their tears could ever soothe. Abra, I can't help you, I eventually answered, my voice firm. I won't. I've already begun working on my own plans. I'm now constructing something for myself, and I'm not going to throw it away to clean up your mess. My father looked up, his expression darkening. So that's it. You're just going to turn your back on your family? I laughed bitterly. You turned your back on me first. Don't try to guilt me into this. It won't work. They departed shortly after that. My mother was still sniffling, and my father appeared to want to dispute but lacked the energy. I let out a trembling breath as the door closed behind them. My wife came downstairs and wrapped her arms around me. You did the right thing, she said. You don't owe them anything. Abra, she was correct. Of course I knew this, but it still stung. Walking away from the firm had been difficult enough. Walking away from my folks seemed much more difficult. But I could not go back, not now, not ever. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected about what they had said about salvaging the firm and correcting things. A part of me wanted to, not for them, but for myself, for the individuals I'd worked with and the clients who had put their faith in me. But another part of me realized it wasn't my duty anymore. They had made their decision, and they now had to live with it. That night I fell asleep more determined than ever that I was not going back. It was time to go forth. After my parents arrived at my door, I had a peculiar feeling of clarity. For the first time in months, I stopped looking back. I'd spent too much time stewing over what had happened, reliving the betrayal, disappointment, and rage. But after closing the door on them, metaphorically and practically, I understood it was time to concentrate on what was ahead. If I wasn't going back to their firm, I needed to create something on my own. Starting from scratch is intimidating, even if you know what you're doing. I did not have a large office or a fancy crew. Hell, I didn't even have a solid plan at start. All I had were the skills and knowledge I'd gained over the previous 9 years, as well as the drive to show to myself, and, perhaps to them, that I could do it. The first stage was deciding what sort of business I wanted to start. That was all I understood about real estate, so it was an easy decision. But I didn't only want to replicate my father's firm. I wanted to do something different and better. I'd learned a lot over the years, not just about the business, but also about how to treat people, clients, workers, and others. My parents had always run the firm like a machine, churning out transactions with little consideration for the people behind them. I wanted to create something more personalized, more human. I began by contacting a handful of my former clients, whom I had worked with for years and who trusted me. I stated that I was beginning my own business and asked if they would like to work with me again. To my astonishment and relief, the most of them were enthusiastic. "We were wondering when you'd get back in the game," one of them added. "Aaron's been a disaster. We've been waiting for someone to step up." Their replies gave me the confidence I needed. If they believed in me, I might be able to pull this off. But getting clients on board was only one part of the puzzle. I also required a team. The corporation was not going to run itself. That's where my former coworkers came in. I stayed in touch with a couple of them after I left, and I knew some were dissatisfied with how things were going under Aaron's leadership. I started making calls one at a time. "Hey, I'm putting something together," I informed them. "It's small right now, but I think it has potential. Are you interested?" The comments were overwhelmingly enthusiastic. Many of them had already left my father's firm, tired of the chaos and incompetence. "I'm in," one of them announced instantly. "I've been waiting for this call." Within a few weeks I had assembled a small but capable staff. We didn't have a beautiful office or flashy equipment, just a shared workstation and a lot of passion. It seemed like the early days of my father's business, when we were scrappy and hungry. Except this time, it was my vision and regulations. Setting up the business was a frenzy. Between registering the firm, creating a website, and finding out how to sell ourselves, I hardly had time to breathe. But it was exciting. Every minor triumph, such as a customer signing on or a lead turning into a sale, seemed like a huge accomplishment. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply working. I was producing something, which felt amazing. Of course, not everything went smoothly. I had moments of uncertainty, when I wondered whether I was taking on too much. The burden of handling funds, logistics, and customer relationships was exhausting at times. But every time I thought about quitting up, I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't simply establishing a business, I was demonstrating to myself that I was capable. One of the most difficult problems was finding a balance between job and personal life. My wife was really supportive, but I knew it was not easy for her. She worked full-time while I focused all of my efforts on the business, frequently working late into the night. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up," she cautioned me one night as I sat slumped over my laptop examining contracts. "I know," I said, scratching my temples. "But if I don't push now, it'll never take off." She did not protest, but I could sense concern in her eyes. It was a reminder that, although growing the business was vital, so was preserving the life we'd created together. I made a mental note to find a better balance, although I wasn't sure how yet. Things gradually fell into place over the course of many weeks. Our first several trades went easily, and client reaction was extraordinarily favorable. "This feels like the old days," one of them said, recalling times when things were simpler and more intimate. I miss this. Hearing those words felt like confirmation. I was doing things correctly. The business began to expand. Not spectacular development, but gradual. And it was plenty for me. Meanwhile, I couldn't ignore the rumors surrounding my father's firm. The word on the street was that things were only getting worse. They were losing business at a rapid pace, and lawsuits were stacking up. It was difficult not to feel a sense of delight. After all, I had warned them. But ultimately I felt sad for the staff and clients who got caught in the crossfire. They deserved better. What shocked me was how many of those clients and staff approached me. It wasn't something I actively sought, at least not first. But news spread that I was beginning my own business, and others approached out. "If you're looking for more staff, let me know." One former coworker stated, "I can't stand it here anymore." Another customer texted me, "We've always trusted you. Let's talk." I wasn't poaching. They were heading at me. And honestly, it felt great. These were folks that saw my value and wanted to work with me because of what I brought to the table. It was in sharp contrast to how my family had handled me. By the end of the second month, we had outgrown our shared workplace and were looking for a real office. It was a minor accomplishment, but it felt big. Standing in that vacant area, considering all the possibilities, I couldn't help but grin. This was mine. All of it. Nobody could take it away from me. I wasn't simply surviving. I was prospering. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely free. Things with my family had gotten out of hand by the time I'd gotten used to my new business. The word has spread about what I was doing. Clients switched to me, workers expressed interest in joining my team, and the word quickly reached my parents and sister. I hadn't spoken to any of them since their visit to my house, and I didn't intend to, but they were clearly not done with me. It began with emails. My father sent a couple variants of the same message. He wanted to chat and figure things out. I disregarded them. Then my mother began phoning. First once a week, then every few days. I never picked up. She eventually left a voicemail, which made my fury boil. "I hope you're happy," she murmured, her voice shaking with barely suppressed wrath. "You're tearing this family apart. I don't know how you can live with yourself." I erased the mail without responding. What was there to say? They'd made their bed. Now they had to lay in it. I was not accountable for their mess, no matter how much they attempted to blame me. However, when my sister became involved, things really heated up. Unlike my parents, who were still attempting to shame me into returning, she went straight for the jugular. I unexpectedly received a letter from a lawyer. I initially believed it was an error, but as I went through it, my stomach plummeted. They accused me of stealing customers and personnel. According to the letter, I purposefully harmed their business by poaching important accounts and employees. They said I was breaching some type of unwritten family pact and asked that I stop all operations immediately. If I didn't comply, they threatened to take legal action. Bree couldn't help but giggle when reading that. It was so absurd and petty. When I worked there, my contract did not have a non-compete provision. I checked twice. They had no legal standing. However, the fact that they had resorted to this strategy revealed all I needed to know about their desperation. Rather than answer immediately, I submitted the letter to my lawyer. "Handle it," I instructed him. "I don't have time for this nonsense," he said, assuring me that the threat was empty and not to worry. Still, the entire experience left a terrible taste in my mouth. A few days later, my parents arrived at my office unexpectedly. It was their first time seeing the new area, and I could tell they weren't pleased. My mother glanced around with a barely veiled disgust, while my father's expression was a mix of fury and defeat. "Do you really think this is going to work?" my father questioned, nodding toward the office. "You're playing a dangerous game." I relaxed back in my chair, unconcerned. "It's already working," I explained simply. "And it's not a game." My mother's cheeks reddened with wrath. "You're ruining everything," she said. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" "To us, Ibra." I stood up and spoke calmly but firmly. "What I'm doing," you said, "is building something for myself. Something you didn't think I was capable of. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine." Aburi, they didn't remain long after that. I believe they recognized there was no use in attempting to guilt me anymore. However, their visit left me disturbed. Not because of what they said, but because it verified what I had believed for a long time. They weren't just unhappy about losing the business. They were angry about losing control of me. For years I had been the dependable one, the one they could rely on to keep things moving smoothly. I'd given up so much of my own life to help them achieve their ambition, and now that I was gone, they weren't sure what to do. It was not about the customers or the money. It was about power dynamics, and they were furious that I had taken it back. Meanwhile, conditions at my father's firm were getting progressively worse. Employees were departing in droves and their reputation was shattered. Aaron, I heard, was hardly showing up for work anymore. Someone informed me he was seen at a pub in the middle of the day, appearing absolutely out of place. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I couldn't stop thinking about how all of this might have been prevented if my parents had made a different decision. The litigation remained ongoing, and from what I could see, the company's legal team was trying to keep up. I did not envy them. Trying to clean up Aaron's mess was like trying to extinguish a forest fire with a garden hose. It was only a matter of time before the entire structure collapsed. Throughout it all, I maintained my focus on my own business. We were steadily increasing and extending our personnel. I engaged a tiny marketing business to assist us spread the word, which paid off almost immediately. The queries began to come in, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. One night, when I was analyzing our finances, my wife entered the room with a glass of ginger ale. "You know," she remarked, sitting next to me, "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." "Ever." I smiled and laid the papers aside. "It feels good," I confessed. "Building something for myself, not answering to anyone else." "A broofy." She placed her head against my shoulder. "You deserve it." Her comments stuck with me long after she'd gone to bed. For so long, I had been striving for someone else's favor. In some ways, my parents, relatives, and Aaron are all involved. But now I was actually doing something for myself. And for the first time, I didn't care what others thought. As I sat there, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, I understood something vital. This wasn't simply about proving my parents incorrect or outperforming Aaron. It was about demonstrating to myself that I was capable of more and didn't require their approval to achieve. And in that instant, I knew I had made the proper decision. Abrafi, allow them to submit their letters. Allow them to make their threats. I was not going back. Not now. Not ever. Months after my parents' impromptu visit to my office and my sister's ridiculous legal threats at an unexpected location. Contentment. My new business was doing nicely. Not completely, but enough to keep me occupied and positive. My wife had even mentioned reducing her own work to join me full-time, and the prospect of establishing something together made it all feel even more significant. Still, elements of my previous existence persisted in the background. My parents were not the kind to just let things go, and even though I had blocked the most of their attempts to reach me, information about the family company or Aaron would occasionally spread among common acquaintances, and the news was rarely positive. Brookie Aaron, it seems, had finally snapped under strain. The litigation had exhausted the company's finances, and the loss of important clients meant that income was almost non-existent. My father was obliged to dispose certain assets to keep the doors open. But even this wasn't enough. A handful of old co-workers who just joined me noted that the workplace was nearly empty. Employees who stayed were motivated by desperation rather than loyalty. One day, I received a call from an old client who had stayed with my father's firm longer than others. "Your parents sold the building," he explained. "I thought you'd want to know." This caught me off surprise. Selling the office. Since its inception, that building had served as the company's headquarters. It wasn't just a workstation. It was a representation of everything we had accomplished together. It was weird to hear that it was gone. Not necessarily melancholy, but as if another piece of the past had crumbled away. "Thank you for informing me," I informed him. "But I'm not involved with them anymore." He answered, "Abaru, I figured as much. Just thought you'd want to hear from someone who's still rooting for you." "Hey Burke. I appreciate it." It reminded me that not everyone had abandoned me amid this disaster. A few weeks later, I received another surprise. This time, it was not a phone call or mail. It was an email from my father. I almost erased it before reading it, but my curiosity won out. The subject line said, "An apology." I opened it and skimmed the first few lines, anticipating more excuses or requests for assistance. But, as I read on, I sensed something was different this time. He wasn't urging me to return or attempting to transfer the responsibility. He said he had made a mistake. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family," he said. "But I see now that I let my pride get in the way. I listened to your sister because I didn't want to admit I was wrong about Aaron. I see now that you were the one who deserved that position, and I'm sorry for not recognizing it sooner." The email continued on for many paragraphs, recalling events from my history that I'd long ago forgotten. He mentioned how much he had relied on me in the early years. How did he know the firm would not have survived without my contributions? Reading it seemed weird. Part of me had been waiting years to hear these words, but now that they were here, I wasn't sure how to react. Towards the conclusion, he said something that stuck with me. "I know I can't change what has happened," he wrote, "but I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." Hello, dude. I closed the email without responding. Forgiveness was a tough issue. I wasn't furious any longer. Not really. But I wasn't prepared to let them back into my life either. It seemed like they were still attempting to draw me back into the past, and I'd fought too hard to put it behind. Meanwhile, my business continued to expand. We relocated into a larger office location and hired a couple new people. Some of the clients who had remained faithful to my father's firm later contacted me, seeking to work with me instead. I was skeptical at first, but after a few chats, I understood they weren't simply searching for a bargain. They were searching for stability. I gave them that, and in return, they trusted me. Aaron, last I heard, was living with my sister again. Although the claims were settled, the financial harm had already been done. He was supposedly seeking to find himself, although what that meant was unclear. I didn't wish him ill, nor did I feel sorry for him. He had been given an opportunity he was not prepared for, and he had squandered it. That was not my problem. My sister, understandably, was not handling the aftermath well. According to what I've heard from common acquaintances, she was bitter and resentful, blaming everyone but herself for what happened. My parents had ceased openly supporting her, so I knew all I needed to know. They were now seeing her for who she truly was, not the intelligent daughter they had always believed in, but someone who was capable of looking out for herself and no one else. One day, while sitting in my office and gazing out at the metropolitan skyline, I realized I felt free. Truly free. The weight of my family's expectations, disappointment, and manipulation was gone. For so long, I defined myself based on what others thought of me and what I could do to gain their acceptance. But suddenly, none of that mattered. I didn't start my business to prove a point or to defy them. I was doing it for myself, my wife, and those who believed in me. And it was enough. I'm not sure whether I'll ever totally reconcile with my family. Perhaps someday, after the dust has settled, we will be able to repair the broken parts. Perhaps we won't. Either way, I'm okay with it. For the time being, my attention is on the future. And for the first time in years, it seems like it belongs to me. At 6 months pregnant, my mother-in-law pushed me down the stairs because I chose my daughter's name. "Change it," she yelled. That's when I cut her off forever. I refused to give my child my mother-in-law's name, so she pushed me down the stairs. My mother-in-law Karen approached me about baby names while I was 6 months pregnant and standing at the top of her stairs. "Will you now reveal the name you have chosen for my granddaughter? Or must I continue to speculate?" She had been making small remarks like this all night, and I continued to sidestep her since I knew she wouldn't appreciate my response. After my grandmother, who reared me throughout my parents' split, my spouse Ryan and I had previously chosen Sophia. There was no way out of informing her now. "We're going to call her Sophia." As if the term physically repulsed her, she repeated it back to me. "Not Karen, but Sophia. For me, the name is everything." Ryan was in my arms for 8 months. She interrupted me. "After his father left, I reared him alone. I sacrificed all for that boy. And you're not even able to give me this one item. Karen, it's not personal. It's the name of my granny." There was nothing humorous about Karen's laughter. "Your grandmother. The woman who made your husband is more important than some woman I've never known." I did not intend that. I stumbled out. "What do you mean then? Because it seems like you're saying that I'm unimportant. You don't value the sacrifices of the past 30 years. The volume of her voice was increasing, and I erred by adding, "Let's talk about this later when you've calmed down." She moved closer, and I retreated, only to find the stairs behind me. "Calm down? You're standing in my house telling me my name isn't good enough for your disgusting baby and I need to calm down. Do you know what I believe? Since the day you met Ryan, I believe you have been attempting to get rid of me. You desire him exclusively. You want to get rid of me entirely. That's not true, Karen. I hope you can appreciate my point of view." The beads of sweat on my forehead were palpable. "Then demonstrate it. Modify the name." "You can't ask me to do that, Karen." In a manner I had never witnessed before. Her eyes were icy. Incorrect response. Her hand was on my chest before I realized it, and she gave me a forceful shove, which caused me to lose my equilibrium and begin to tumble. I reached for nothing. My brain could only scream one thing, so my arms wrapped about my tummy and my hips smashed on the stairs. "Keep the infant safe." The wind left my body as soon as I struck the bottom, and I just lay there looking up at 40 expressionless faces. For a brief while I noticed Karen standing at the top with her arm outstretched. Satisfaction as though she accomplished her goal precisely. Then it disappeared, and she rushed down the steps in tears. God, oh God. She made a slip. I attempted to seize her. Someone made a 911 call. Ryan fell to his knees next to me after pushing through the throng. "Are you all right, baby? Are you able to move? Is the infant doing well?" Karen was immediately behind him, screaming that I couldn't handle it any longer and that she was afraid and trying to catch me. "Ryan." She pushed me. She gave me a shove. The sobbing ceased. Karen's attitude was that of a wounded animal as she looked at me. "Do you hear me, Ryan? Have you heard what she's saying about me?" Her voice became high-pitched and frantic as she seized his arm. I'd never harmed my grandchild. I attempted to apprehend her. "She's perplexed. She struck her head, Ryan. She is unsure of her own words." No one spoke. Ryan seemed to be seeing his entire world fall apart as he glanced between us. "Just give her some room, Mom. How in the world am I experiencing this?" She went to sit on the couch and sobbed. The ambulance arrived. Ryan held my hand the entire time he cycled behind me. He kept inquiring about my well-being and assuring me that everything would be all right, but his expression gave me the impression that he was unsure of which version of events to accept. I was connected up to monitors at the hospital, and after what seemed like an eternity, we received word that the baby was doing well. I started crying so much that I was having trouble breathing. Ryan also shed tears. Then he asked me what actually occurred up there. He kept mumbling, "Thank God." And I thought, okay, now he believes me. Now he sees what his mom really is. I repeated it to him. My stomach began to drop as he became silent for a considerable amount of time. The name made her angry. "She wouldn't harm you physically, but I am aware of that. It's likely that you lost your balance." She pushed me after placing her hand on my chest. "Ryan." Squeezing my hand, he seemed to be attempting to reassure me despite my delusions. "You just experienced a horrible event, and you're worn out. Perhaps her reaching for you was transformed into something else by your head." His eyes showed it to me. This had to be untrue for him. He needed his mother to remain the person he believed her to be. I was also quite exhausted. Our daughter's heartbeat filled the room, my hip ached, and the monitors continued to beep. And all I wanted was for it to end. I responded by saying, "Maybe it happened fast. Maybe I wasn't totally sure what I felt." Ryan kissed my forehead and his entire body relaxed. "Let's concentrate on the baby's well-being." I didn't have the strength to make him see something he was trying to ignore, so I let him believe it. Her palm flat against my chest, the half-second of nothing beneath my feet, I repeatedly replayed as I lay awake in the hospital bed that night with my hand on my stomach. I was aware of how I felt and that Karen was at home at the moment, phoning each member of the family and practicing her version until it sounded like the real thing. The plot would change to something I couldn't recognize by dawn. Before her falsehood became the only thing people remembered, I had about 10 hours. Karen's version had already gained traction by the following morning. I received 15 text messages from folks I had only met once or twice when I woke up. After my fall, Ryan's aunt wanted to know if I was feeling better. His relative expressed her hope that I was receiving assistance after learning that I had been experiencing emotional difficulties. According to a different cousin, Karen called her at midnight and sobbed, expressing her concern for me and the baby. I'm not concerned that she shoved me. As if I were the issue, they were worried about me. I needed to hear Karen's exact words, so I called Ryan's aunt. "She's just so concerned about you, honey. That poor woman was crying on the phone and said she didn't know what she'd done wrong. She told me, you've been hormonal and erratic this whole pregnancy. She claimed that Ryan has been battling your mood swings for months and that she has been making an effort to help him. And then to be charged with a terrible crime in her own house." She gave a little tisk. "Do you think you're stable enough to be a mother?" she said. "Sweetheart, she's not attempting to be mean. For that infant she is truly afraid." I was unable to feel my hands. She expressed her fear for my child. "She's just worried. All of us are. You know, asking for aid is never a sign of weakness." After hanging up, I contacted my sister Olivia right away and started talking endlessly. When I was done, she remarked sharply, "Listen, Emma. You will have to co-parent with that woman for 18 years if you don't get Ryan's head out of his ass before this baby is born. Take screenshots of every text and document every dialogue. This will only get worse." How worse could this possibly get? I didn't know just how worse it could get, was my immediate thought. That evening I was prepared when Ryan arrived home. "We must discuss what your mother is saying to others." With a groan, he put his keys down. "I spoke with her earlier today. All of this is definitely hurting her. In fact, my jaw dropped. Ryan, she's hurt. I'm mentally disturbed, and she's telling your whole family about it. She expressed her concern that I'm unfit to be a mother to your aunt. She did not say that. She simply worries about you and the stress you've been experiencing. What did she say to you specifically? His entire face softened as he took a seat across from me. He was falling for her. She described her early years to me. When she was 6 years old, her mother left her. She simply left a message and never returned. She grew up believing that no one cared about her and that she was invisible. After having me, Mom at last felt like she mattered and that she existed. His eyes were filled with sadness as he gazed at me. I wanted to scream because I could see where this was leading. He reached for my hand and added, "Naming the baby Karen would have meant she finally mattered enough to be remembered. She claimed that ever since we became engaged, you have been attempting to force her out of the family and have never respected her position. Did she mention anything about the push? She promised never to harm you. That you are aware that's not a suitable response. She claimed that when you began to tumble, she reached for you. She claimed to have been thinking about it constantly and to find it incomprehensible that anyone could believe she would ever harm her own grandchild." I withdrew my hand from his. She never once mentioned what she had actually done to me, instead spending the entire session sobbing about her early years. She discussed it. "I didn't do it," she said. "You also think she's real. I think she loved her son, had a horrible upbringing, and erred in her response to the name issue. However, I don't think she shoved you. That is unbelievable. Everything I know about my mother is false if I think that. It was there. The reality beneath it all. Because he would be broken if he believed me, he was unable to trust me. Karen was aware of that. For 30 years, she had made herself the center of his universe. The mother who sacrificed all for her son, the child who was abandoned. She wasn't merely rejecting the shove. Without shattering his entire foundation, she was preventing Ryan from seeing the push. I'm mentally unfit to be a mother, she's telling your family. She's simply afraid. She believes that you will take me away from her. The heir walked out of the room. You're standing up for the woman who nearly took our daughter away. He got to his feet and took his keys off the counter. Tonight I can't do this. Karen had committed a mistake. But she was also planning. She assumed that I would ignore this and maintain harmony. She was unaware that as I reached the bottom of those stairs, I underwent a transformation. She was no longer in contact with the woman who had wed her son. She had a mother to contend with. I had had enough of waiting for someone to believe me. I would have to discover the truth on my own if I wanted it to be revealed. At her house, someone noticed something. There's always something to see. I was going to start making calls tomorrow. I began making calls the following morning. The only person who hadn't texted me to pretend to be worried or to inquire whether I was getting aid was Ryan's cousin Lily, who had attended the party. I assumed I could rely on her. She called me within 10 minutes after I messaged her to ask if we could talk. She said, "I was wondering when you'd reach out. Though I wasn't sure whether you wanted to hear from any family members at the moment, I still wanted to say something. If anyone witnessed what transpired at the stairs, please let me know." I could hear her breathing when she fell silent. She said, "I didn't see the push. It made me feel powerless. I had no idea how I was going to prevail in this conflict." Lily spoke next, but I caught a glimpse of her face just before you fell. Emma's expression. She paused. When you fell down, she didn't appear surprised. She appeared content, as if she had accomplished her goal. She was running down in tears when it vanished. Since I too saw that, I was genuinely relieved. I wasn't insane. Would you say that to Ryan? Bitterly, she laughed. He's not going to believe me. They never do. What are you saying? At a family cookout when I was 16, Karen told everyone that I had stolen $200 from her purse. She was so convincing, sobbing and trembling and screaming she couldn't believe her own niece would do this to her. But I didn't believe her. Lily's tone tightened. She was believed by my parents. They made me acquire a job to reimburse her for money I never took, and they grounded me for the entire summer. Lying about me now wouldn't matter to her if she had lied about Lily when she was 16. I think she still thinks I took it. Lily let out a deep sigh. After she makes up her mind that something happened, it becomes real to her. It doesn't matter what really happened. That someone like her was my mother-in-law and the grandma of my future daughter made me feel ill. I showed Ryan everything when he got home. Lily's text regarding Karen's facial expression, the money narrative, and the warning about her delusion. His expression altered in a way I had never seen before after he read it twice. Shaken, not defensive, nor offering justifications. He sat there looking at his phone as if it were the first time he had ever seen his mother. All I felt was fear, even though I wanted to feel like I had won something. This was not going to end with Karen sobbing over the phone to family members if Lily was correct about the pattern. The situation was only going to worsen. My phone rang 3 days later, and I saw Karen's name. I have no idea why I responded. Perhaps I genuinely believed she would offer an apology. Perhaps I simply didn't want to give her another excuse to label me challenging. "I know you've been talking to Lily," she continued, eschewing the politeness entirely. I clenched my jaw and said, "I know you're digging around trying to turn my own family against me. I'm just trying to get people to see the truth." She laughed. "The truth is that you fell down the stairs and decided to blame me because you've never liked me. You're trying to steal my son from me, and I won't let that happen. I can describe the symptoms of postpartum depression, Emma, and I know exactly what CPS looks for when they receive a call about an unstable new mother." Her voice then became dark and cold. I was frozen in place. "Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. You want to keep playing this game? Keep asking questions." I could hear the glee on her face as she said, "I'll call every agency. Keep turning people against me. And I will make sure you never have a moment alone with that baby. I'll speak with each physician. I'll ensure that everyone is aware of your unpredictable and suspicious behavior." She murmured, "I've already heard from Ryan about your mood swings, your crying, and your compulsive worrying." She laughed patronizingly. "Who do you think he's going to believe, sweetheart? His mother who has loved him for 30 years, or the woman who accused her of trying to harm her grandchild?" My hands were shaking, but I didn't back down. "Listen to me, Karen. If you ever threaten me or my daughter again, I'll make sure Ryan hears every word you just said." She had actually said it aloud, threatening to call CPS and take my baby, and she did it over the phone because she knew I couldn't prove it. No witnesses, no recording, just her word against mine as usual. And if she was already considering CPS, she had most likely already begun setting the foundation. She hung up, and the room fell silent. 3 weeks went by with nothing. No calls, no texts, no Karen showing up at my door with a new threat wrapped in a smile. And while the silence should have been a relief, it only made things worse. The question wasn't whether Karen was coming for my baby, but rather how much of a head start she already had. And that thought scared me. Every creak in the house made me cringe, but I tried to concentrate on getting ready for the baby by washing the tiny clothes and folding them into the dresser we'd painted pink, setting up the crib and hanging the little mobile with the stars and moons that played a lullaby when you wound it up. I would always find myself at the window whenever a car slowed down outside. Ryan claimed that perhaps his mother was finally reflecting on what she had done, but I could see him constantly checking his phone, waiting for something he wouldn't acknowledge he was waiting for. Olivia made sure that only my side of the family attended my baby shower, not Ryan's. Olivia caught me staring and squeezed my hand, telling me that everything would be fine. I tried to smile, but my face wouldn't let me because I knew that this wasn't over. I kept watching the door the entire time, expecting Karen to enter with that serene smile which indicates that she's about to blow up. I was at my OB appointment 4 weeks later, and something felt strange from the moment I walked in. The receptionist, who usually smiled and asked how I was feeling, hardly looked at me. She simply checked me in and told me to wait without making eye contact. I sat in the waiting room with my hand on my belly, trying to figure out what had changed. Perhaps she was having a bad day. She doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. She just waits. My stomach was in knots by the time they called my name, and it had nothing to do with the baby. The appointment itself went well. The baby was healthy, and the heartbeat was strong. However, I caught one of the nurses glancing at me from behind the desk and turning away when I caught her. Perhaps I was being overly suspicious. I had 3 or 4 weeks until my due date, but after we were done, my doctor asked if she could talk to me in private for a little while. She closed the door and sat down across from me with a cautious expression on her face, saying, "I need to tell you something, and I want you to stay calm." My entire body went cold. We've had multiple calls over the past 3 weeks from someone posing as a worried family member, asking about your mental health history, whether you've displayed signs of instability or paranoia during your pregnancy, and whether you've had any psychiatric episodes. Is there something wrong with the baby? No, the baby is perfect. This is about something else. She paused as if she was carefully choosing her words. I had to put a password on my file because I couldn't breathe for a moment. What did you tell them? Nothing. We don't give out patient information to anyone, but I wanted you to know because the calls have been persistent and specific. Whoever this is seems to be trying to build some sort of case. I knew exactly who it was. I didn't even need to guess. I was going to say the same thing. And I'm also recording these calls in your chart in case you need a record later. My doctor nodded, and I thanked her before leaving that office with my hands shaking. Karen wasn't just talking anymore. She was taking action. No information goes to anyone, including family, without that password. I got a strange call this morning from someone claiming to be a friend of yours. They asked if you'd seemed erratic or unstable at work lately. They mentioned you were pregnant and suggested someone check on you. My jaw clenched. Did they leave a name? No. 3 days later, my boss called me into her office looking confused and a little uneasy. I told her it was a family matter and I was taking care of it, and she nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. They said they wanted to remain anonymous because they didn't want to upset you, but they were adamant that I should be on the lookout for warning signs. She only needed to sow seeds, get people to ask questions, and leave a trail of worried calls, so that if anyone looked into it later, they would discover a pattern of people expressing concern about my mental health. I called Olivia on my way home and told her everything. She didn't need anyone to believe her completely. She remained silent for a while before revealing that she had been doing some research and that she had contacted Ryan's aunt, who had inquired about my well-being following my fall, and that Karen had been phoning her weekly to weep about you, claiming that you had been experiencing psychotic episodes, and that she was afraid for her grandchild. Since I couldn't drive and hear this at the same time, I pulled over. Olivia added, "If something happens," I sat there in my parked car staring at nothing. Karen wasn't just trying to make me look crazy, she was recruiting people, getting witnesses lined up for whatever she was planning. "If something happens," she said, asking the aunt if she would be willing to be a character witness. I sat Ryan down when he got home and told him everything. The calls to my doctor, the calls to my workplace, and what his aunt told Olivia. As I spoke, I noticed a shift in his expression. First one of bewilderment, then one of disbelief, and finally, what I had never seen in him before. Fear. "She's trying to take the baby," he said quietly. He took out his phone and called her, and I watched him put it on speaker. She answered on the second ring, all warm and lovely. "Hello, honey. I've missed your voice." "Mom, have you been calling Emma's doctor?" Silence. A long one. Then her voice came back different. "Careful. You know your wife hasn't been stable, and you've told me yourself how emotional and paranoid she's been." Ryan hung up, and as he sat there staring at his phone with a pale face, I realized what had happened. Ryan had been venting to his mother as usual, telling her that I was tired, emotional, and worried about the birth, all of the usual pregnancy stuff. That night, Ryan went to check the mail and returned with a single envelope from his mother, which he handed to me and opened, revealing a piece of paper with neat handwriting and blue ink. Karen had taken every word and turned it into ammunition, but she didn't call back or text, which I almost wished she would have done because the silence was worse. It said, "All you had to do was name her after me," with a tiny rightward slant. "Enjoy these final weeks together." After reading it 3 times, my hand began to shake so violently that the paper rattled. Ryan grabbed it from me and read it, and I saw his face become white. We didn't speak for a while and I had trouble falling asleep that night. Karen had come up to our house, placed that envelope in our mailbox with her own hands, and while we were inside, going about our lives, she was right there, close enough to touch our door, no longer hiding. I just lay there with my hand on my belly, feeling my baby's kick, and thinking about that note. I went into labor at 38 weeks on a Friday morning, and my water broke in the kitchen while I was making toast. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the puddle on the floor, thinking, this is it. Karen had made it clear that she wouldn't miss the birth, and she wanted me to know that she could reach me whenever she wanted. The birth was 2 weeks away, maybe less. When we arrived at the hospital, Ryan reminded the nurses that his mother, Karen, was not permitted entry under any circumstances before I could. If she showed up, you should call security. Don't speak to her. Don't let her speak to anyone and simply get her out. Ryan drove me there, exceeding the speed limit by 15 miles per hour the entire way. He turned to me and took my face in his hands, saying, "She's not getting anywhere near you, I promise." The nurse looked a little surprised by his tone, but he nodded and took a note. I felt like I had been supported throughout this entire ordeal. After his mom left the note, he completely changed his mind and told himself that his mother was a cruel person. I would squeeze Ryan's fingers until I could feel his bones grinding together, and he never once complained as I held his hand through contractions that felt like my entire body was being torn apart from the inside, coming in waves that made it impossible to think about anything else. I was 6 hours into labor. Ryan's head snapped toward the door. No, 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 no. The yelling grew louder. He continued to tell me that I was doing great and that our Sophia was almost here. At first I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the voice from somewhere down the hall. Before I could stop Ryan, he was out the door, and I heard his voice blending with Karen's as she screamed about her rights, about her grandbaby, and that we were keeping her away from her own family. Another contraction struck, and all I could do was hold onto the bed rails and try to breathe. You need to leave now. Ryan, honey, I'm just worried about the baby. You know she's not stable. You've told me yourself. I said leave. I'm your mother. I have every right to be here when my grandson is born. You have no rights. Hers was loud and frantic, while his was low and hard. When you shoved my pregnant wife down the stairs, you lost them. I didn't shove her, she fell. Why won't anyone believe me? I've only loved this family, and now I'm being treated like a criminal. You called her doctor, her job, and CPS, and you left a note in our mailbox telling her to enjoy her final weeks with our child. I gave up my entire life for you, Ryan, and this is how you repay me. By picking her over your own mother. Yes, I'm picking her. I'm picking my wife and my daughter, and I'm telling you right now. If you don't leave this hospital, I'll call the police myself. You're not a worried grandmother, you're a stalker. How dare you talk to me like that after everything I've given up for you? The nurse returned, looking shaken, and said, Ma'am, your husband is handling it, but she's asking to speak to a social worker. She's telling people you've threatened to hurt yourself. I actually laughed, despite the fact that I was having another contraction. Of course she is. 25 minutes later, a woman in a blazer entered and identified herself as a social worker. With gritted teeth I asked, what concerns? She said she had to do a wellness check because of reported concerns. Someone said you have a history of mental illness and have threatened to harm yourself. They said your husband is too afraid of you to speak up. Ryan returned at that moment, his hands shaking and his face red. The social worker looked at me and said, Is this true? Check my medical records. Check the notes from my OB. It's all documented. That person is my mother, and she has been harassing my wife for months. She has been calling her doctors at work in an attempt to make her look insane. Every single thing she told you is a lie. My nurse looked at me and said, Has she shown any signs of instability? None. She's been completely calm and cooperative. The only problem we've had is the woman in the waiting room. Then we heard Karen screaming again, louder this time, and I put a password on my file because she was calling pretending to be family. Security had arrived. Ma'am, you must accompany us. Don't touch me. I'm not going anywhere. Ryan, don't do this to me. I'm your mother. I'm your mother. Her voice cracked into something that didn't sound human. You can't make me leave. That's my grandbaby. She's poisoned all of you against me. You don't know what she's really like. I heard scuffling and heard her yelling about lawyers and rights and how everyone would be sorry. This isn't over. Do you hear me? This isn't over. She's going to take that baby and leave you with nothing. I'm trying to save you. Her voice grew farther and farther away until at last there was nothing left. She screamed all the way to the parking lot. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. Ryan returned to my bedside with wet eyes, took my hand, and pressed his forehead against mine. I didn't have the energy to respond because another contraction hit and suddenly it was time to push. Sophia was born at 12:01 that night, and when they placed her on my chest, she was so small and warm, and everything else just stopped. When she opened her eyes and looked at me, I forgot Karen was there. I forgot the yelling, the threats, the months of anxiety, and it was just the three of us, Ryan and Sophia, our baby named after my grandmother who reared me. She had dark hair and small fingers, and I was sobbing too. Karen, the lady who gave me a sense of importance, was no longer able to accept that or anything else. My father-in-law demanded $8,500 for a business, refused to explain it. When I said no, he called me stingy, then turned our marriage upside down in revenge. Just now my father-in-law has done something to destroy my marriage. James is the name of my spouse and we have been married for the last 5 years. In addition, we have a beautiful son together. I greatly respect the way that James works tirelessly and the extent to which he is devoted to both his family and his career. Both of us are lucky enough to earn decent salaries, yet we manage our money in ways that are not the same. I am the one who takes responsibility for paying the mortgage on our property and ensuring that all of the expenses for the household, such as electricity, water, and internet, are paid in full. In the meanwhile, James is responsible for covering all of our son's costs, including school fees, clothes, and any other items that he need. In addition to providing financial support for his parents by sending them money every month, he also contributes to our auto loan payments. Even though James's parents are retired, they do not have any funds to fall back on. They have 2 daughters in addition to him, who is their oldest kid. His parents, however, did not have a history of financial stability. Throughout the years, any money that they did possess was utilized for the purpose of settling their medical expenses as well as financing their daughters' weddings. As a result of the situation, James has taken it upon himself to provide assistance to them because they have been left with no resources. Whenever it is required, he ensures that they have the funds to cover their daily expenses, purchase groceries, and pay for medical examinations. In contrast to his sisters, he does not receive any support from them. In their place, they make use of their parents by acting as though they are free babysitters, putting their children in their care for hours on end without providing any sort of monetary assistance. However, it is James who consistently rises to the occasion, ensuring that his parents are looked for while his sisters continue to take advantage of their kindness without reciprocating with addition. I am willing to assist James with the care of his parents. I make it a point to go and see them on every weekend so that I can check in with them and see if they need anything, as well as spend some time with them. I never fail to ensure that their refrigerator is well stocked with fresh produce, so ensuring that they will never have to be concerned about running out of food. In addition, I assist my mother-in-law with her garden, which I am aware that she has a great affection for. I would want to provide her with support in order to help her preserve the beauty of it, since it is something of which she is proud. In addition to assisting her with her day-to-day requirements, I also strive to make sure that my mother-in-law has some time for herself to unwind and feel like a pampered queen. In order for her to be able to relax and have some fun, I take her to a spa for a day of pampering and a massage every single month. After having dedicated so much time to diligently working and caring for her family over the course of all these years, I am of the opinion that she is entitled to it. Of all their children, I truly believe that in comparison to the others, James and I have done the most to support and assist his parents. Providing financial assistance is not the only thing that we do. We make it a point to take actions that will make their daily life simpler and more pleasant. However, it appears that despite all of the things that we do, the parents of James only have a unique fondness for his sisters. They consistently place their daughters in a position of greater importance, regardless of the amount of assistance we provide them. They scarcely acknowledge our son, but they do utilize the money that James provides them to purchase presents for their other grandkids. This gets progressively more apparent with each and every Christmas that passes. They are willing to go to great lengths to get costly presents for the children of their daughter, but they are never willing to put out the same kind of effort for our son. He received nothing more than a single pair of socks from them over that whole year. Both James and I have been aware of this for a considerable amount of time, but in order to maintain family harmony, we have decided to keep our mouths shut about it. It is not our intention to bring up needless drama, but it does sting to realize that our hard work is not acknowledged when compared to the favoritism shown to his sisters, who put in the absolute smallest amount of effort. Then, last year, there was a change in the behavior of my father-in-law. He began to form new friendships with other retired guys who lived in his area. Every time that I came across him, he would be brimming with enthusiasm as he shared with me the many subjects that they were instructing him in. According to his account, they were teaching him how to invest his money and were even urging him to establish his own company. The concept appeared to interest him much, and I sincerely believed that it was a positive development. I provided him with some encouragement, with the assumption that working on a project that was solely his own would keep him occupied and interested. I reasoned that it would be beneficial to his mental health, providing him with a sense of purpose, and preventing him from experiencing a sense of directionlessness in his retirement. I had no idea what was truly about to happen. Not long ago, my father-in-law approached James and me with a request that was anything from trivial. It was more akin to a demand. He informed us that he had finally settled on a company concept and that he was now in need of a significant amount of capital in order to get started. He made it quite apparent that he was anticipating our complete support in order to bring his vision to fruition. Naturally, I was intrigued and inquired of him as to what type of business he intended to establish, but rather than providing us with any specifics, he dismissed my inquiry. He mentioned that he was not going to share his concept with anyone else in order to prevent others from stealing it. That was something that struck me as peculiar right from the bat. Why wouldn't he offer us even an approximate sense of what his strategy was if he was so certain that it would work? After that, he made the shocking revelation that he expected us to give him $8,000. James and I were both utterly surprised by what happened. That favor was far from being insignificant. The sum of money was truly astronomical. My father-in-law immediately ignored the explanation that James had given, which was that we didn't have that amount of cash just laying around, and instead called him stingy. He started to urge that we should have faith in him, becoming defensive and emotional in the process. Do you not have faith in me? I am the one who gave birth to you. If I were not certain of what I was doing, do you believe that I would ask you for this amount of money? He continued in a confident tone. Trust me and give me the money. I promise I will pay you back with interest. James was astonished, but he offered a cautious nod as if he was genuinely contemplating the idea. Meanwhile, I remained seated in a state of disbelief. Something about the entire scenario struck me as extremely suspicious. My father-in-law had been retired for many years, and even before that he had never really held a steady job, and now, all of a sudden, he had what was supposed to be a brilliant business plan, but he refused to provide any specifics, and on top of that, he was making a promise of an almost unimaginable return on investment. Everything about it seemed far too perfect to be real. I explained to James's father that any savings my husband and I had were savings that we had accumulated together. Additionally, because my husband was already responsible for a great deal of financial obligations, I was the one who contributed the most to our savings. Therefore, if he was requesting that we invest such a large amount of money in his business, we would need to have some form of guarantee. I made it clear that it was his decision whether or not he was comfortable sharing the specifics of his business strategy. However, in the event that he chose not to share the information, we would require the appropriate paperwork to ensure that the money would be repaid to us at some point in the future. The instant that I made that statement, both James and his father appeared to be deeply insulted. When I requested that my father-in-law sign some paperwork simply because he was borrowing money from us, his face turned red with anger, and he immediately began yelling. He couldn't believe that I would make such a request, and he felt that demanding that he sign paperwork was an insult. He told me that I ought to have that kind of trust in him, and to my surprise, James sided with his father. According to him, he had complete faith in his father, and because we were financially able to provide him with $8,000, it wasn't something that we ought to be quarreling over. I was utterly shocked by what I was hearing. Although our finances were stable, this did not mean that we could simply discard such a substantial sum of money without any form of security. I argued with James, insisting that our savings were not his to give away. The money that was accumulated was intended to provide for our future, and more importantly, for the future of our son. We both worked hard to build it, and he had no right to treat it like his personal fund to hand out without my agreement. If he wanted to help his father, we could discuss it properly, but expecting me to just hand over our hard-earned money without a second thought, I responded to James in a manner that he found extremely offensive. He yelled at me, claiming that I was casting doubt on his father and implying that his father was attempting to steal from us. I maintained my composure and assured him that I had not said anything like that. I was simply being pragmatic. Neither James nor his father were willing to listen to my logical reasoning, despite the fact that I had pointed out that there was no guarantee that this business venture would be successful, and that we wouldn't just lose the $8,000 that we had loaned them. I also made the point that we had never been repaid for anything in the past by my father-in-law, and that he was now suddenly starting a business out of nowhere. I made it clear that if I were to loan such a large sum of money to anyone, I would need some form of assurance that it would be paid back. They persisted in urging me to trust them more because, as they said, we were family. They made it appear as though I was the unreasonable one only because I wanted to proceed with caution. The situation took a turn for the worse from there. My father-in-law, clearly enraged, erupted with frustration. He yelled out that in his time, women were not even consulted about these matters, and he did not understand why he was interfering. He made it very clear that he thought this was something that should be discussed between men and that he did not think it was appropriate for me to question him. After that, he turned to James and said something that made me feel absolutely horrified. He conveyed to him that it was necessary for him to maintain control over his wife and to prevent me from being engaged in matters of this kind, as if I were a disobedient horse that needs someone to rein me in. It was at that very moment that I came to an understanding. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. And it was abundantly evident that I was not receiving any. The words that my father-in-law spoke to me were extremely offensive. Don't get involved. It was as if I required permission from my husband. I was not going to remain silent in the face of such indignity, particularly since he was the one who was approaching us with a request for financial assistance. I gazed directly at him and told him precisely what was on my mind. I reminded him that he was the one who was pleading for our money. Nevertheless, he had the gall to verbally attack me on the grounds that I was a woman. I made it abundantly clear that we were not going to give him 1 cent of our money. If James wanted to assist his father, he would have to come up with the money himself. Our savings account is shared by the two of us, and James did not have the authority to withdraw any of the funds without my consent. As soon as I uttered those words, my father-in-law went completely off the deep end. He began to scream at me, hurling one accusation after another, as though I had done something to offend him personally. James did not seem to be any happier either. His expression was strained, and it was clear to me that he was seething with anger. Nevertheless, rather than escalating the disagreement, he made an effort to soothe his father. He requested that my father-in-law give us some time and promised him that he would speak with me. This seemed to calm my father-in-law down a bit, and eventually, he left our home. After he had gone, however, James and I had one of the most violent arguments we've ever had. He accused me of being rude, cold, and mean for refusing to help his father. He believed that I had shown disrespect to him and embarrassed his father by giving him a blunt no. However, I did not see it that way. I told James that his father was abusing our hard-earned money without any consideration for us, was refusing to provide any details, and was even resorting to insults when I did not immediately agree with him. How was I supposed to have faith in a person who couldn't even bother to give us a brief description of what the company was about? I can tell that James is completely torn between me and his father, but at the same time, I feel completely alone in this situation. Instead of considering things from my point of view, he is making me out to be the bad guy just because I refuse to be manipulated without any kind of resistance. To be completely honest, that causes more pain than anything else. Therefore, I am going to update Reddit 1. I know with absolute certainty that my father-in-law is not a person who can be trusted without question, and I am truly relieved that I trusted my instincts and stood my ground. If it had been up to my husband, the $8,500 would already be in his father's possession at this point in time. Without any further questions, James is absolutely at the mercy of his parents. He doesn't hesitate to comply with any request they make of him, regardless of how irrational it might be. His father is well aware of how to exploit this relationship, and he takes advantage of James's sense of responsibility, shame, and devotion in order to get him to do as he pleases. As a result, his father is able to rely on him whenever he finds himself in need of cash. He has never once asked his daughters for financial assistance, and there is a very good reason for that. He is aware that they would not provide him with any money at all. They are not under any obligation to be the ones who provide for others, and they definitely do not allow themselves to be coerced into giving money. On the other hand, my husband is a simple target. Father-in-law is aware that he can depend on James to step up to the plate each and every time, regardless of how much it inconveniences us. Update number 2. Recently, my husband and I have been in conflict with each other more than we ever have before. The stress that is present in our home is intolerable, and it is all due to the unrelenting pressure that his father is placing on him. On a daily basis, James receives a barrage of calls and text messages that implore him to give his father the money. At this point, things have only gotten worse because his mother and sisters have also gotten involved. Rather than accepting that $8,500 is a significant sum of money and that we are completely within our rights to think things through, they continue to tell James that, being the eldest son, it is his obligation to provide funding for their father's business endeavor, regardless of any concerns he may have. If that weren't already bad enough, they have also begun attacking me. They constantly refer to me as greedy and a gold digger, as though I am the one who is selfishly keeping money for myself when the truth of the matter is that I am only attempting to safeguard the future of our family. They claim that I am attempting to destroy the unity of our family by refusing to support my father-in-law's unreasonable demand. The most upsetting aspect of this situation is that it is beginning to have an impact on James. I can see that it is happening gradually. The guilt, the pressure, the emotional manipulation, all of these things are wearing him down. It appears that he is being brainwashed by them, and he is gradually convincing himself that they are correct and that I am the one being unreasonable. It feels as though I am losing him to his family. Despite the fact that I try my best to reason with him, they keep pulling him away from me even further. James keeps insisting that we should just give his father the money and think of it as a one-time investment. He argues that whether we get the money back or lose it entirely, it doesn't really matter. He just wants to get this over with and make his father happy. However, I disagree with him completely. I have told him over and over again that I am not comfortable with that. We are not his family's personal cash cow, and I am beyond sick and tired of them always looking to us whenever they need money. It is never ending. They continue to take, and when we finally say no, we are labeled as the villains. At this point, I understood that I could not merely sit around and hope that James would not make a decision that was reckless. I knew that I had to take action. Therefore, as a precautionary measure, I withdrew my share of the money from our joint account. I did not make this decision lightly, but I was unable to take the risk. It was me, not my husband, who had contributed the most to our savings account up until this point. I had worked tirelessly to build up that financial cushion, not just for our own benefit, but for our child's future, for emergencies, and for stability. I wasn't going to let all of that be drained away because his family viewed us as their personal ATM. If I had left the money there, I knew exactly what would happen. James was desperate to gain the approval of his father and sisters, which put him in a very dangerous position. They would continually pressure him and wear him down bit by bit until he ultimately gave in. Once he gave them money, it wouldn't stop there. They would continue to return, demanding even more, coming up with more excuses, and pulling him in deeper and deeper. There was a very real possibility that, in my absence, James would give them every last dollar. I couldn't let that happen. At least now I have control over my share. I can be certain that the money I worked for is secure. If James still wants to give his father money, then that is his responsibility. He will have to figure out how to go about doing it without compromising the financial stability that I have worked so hard to establish. Update number 3. James attempted to take out $8,500 from our account without my knowledge, just as I had suspected earlier, and he was infuriated by the fact that I had already withdrawn my share. He yelled that his family had been correct about me all along. He insisted that he, as the head of the family, had the authority to determine how our money should be spent, and that I had no right to act against him. The altercations between us became more intense with each passing day. Then, in what James referred to as an act of retaliation, he made the decision to leave the household. He packed his belongings and departed, explaining that he needed to teach me a lesson about family ethics. It was like being slapped in the face. He was the man with whom I had built a life, the man whom I had loved, supported and stood by for years, the man for whom I had made sacrifices. However, when the time came for him to make a decision between his parents and his wife, the latter of whom had done more for them than his own sisters would have, he made the decision to choose his parents. I am devastated. For years, I have treated his family as if they were my own, doing everything in my power to provide for them financially, emotionally, and physically. Despite the fact that I have refused to give them a substantial amount of money that I may never see again, I am being punished as a result. However, things have become increasingly clear to me the more I have considered the situation. It is simply not right for me to agree to give them $8,500. No matter how much pressure James and his family exert on me, I am certain that I am not in the wrong. I am taking a stand for myself and for the financial well-being of my children. Therefore, if James wants to break up our family over this issue, and if he truly believes that walking away from his wife and child is the right thing to do, then I will not stand in his way. This is a decision that he has to make for himself. However, I will not allow myself to be manipulated or guilt-tripped any longer. If standing my ground means that I will lose him, then so be it. At the end of the day, I deserve to have a partner who appreciates me just as much as I have appreciated them. Update number 4. Since my previous update, 3 months have passed. My husband is still living with his parents and has refused to return home. It appears as though he has completely settled in with them. Despite all of this, he has not made any attempts to reconcile with me. Despite the fact that he has stopped communicating with me, he continues to make time for our son. He visits him every other day and spends time with him, which I appreciate. He has not abandoned his role as a father, at least. Regarding our relationship, we no longer communicate with each other, we do not speak about our marriage, or about ourselves. There is nothing. It appears that the anger he felt on that day when I refused to give him the money has not dissipated. It is as if he is harboring some resentment and is adamant about refusing to accept the fact that I was completely within my rights to take a stand. However, yesterday, out of the blue, he contacted me. Initially, I was shocked. We hadn't spoken to each other in weeks, so my first thought was that something had occurred to our son. Since it was his day to take care of him, my heart began to race, and I rapidly answered the phone, getting ready for the worst. On the other hand, what he said immediately after that completely took me by surprise. He appeared to be extremely upset over the course of the phone call. In addition, for the first time in months, he did not direct his anger toward me. He informed me that he had recently found out the actual reason for which his father had been so desperate for the $8,500. It was not for a business endeavor. In fact, there is no business endeavor. Instead, he discovered that his sisters had been applying pressure on their father-in-law to purchase a family vacation home for them. According to their reasoning, owning a vacation home would be a wise investment for their children, providing a space where the family could come together and create lasting memories. However, neither of them was willing to contribute even a single dollar to the purchase of the property. They were not at all interested in paying for it on their own. Therefore, they persuaded their father that it was his obligation to make it happen. Instead of rejecting their request, the father-in-law made an effort to obtain the funds from us. Daniel confessed that if we had provided the money to the father-in-law, he would have returned asking for even more. The $8,500 would not have been the final amount, it was simply going to be the start of things. He would have kept on coming up with excuses and hiding behind his phony business concept until enough money had been amassed to cover the costs of the vacation home. When I heard this, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, frustration, and most of all, validation. Everything I had suspected was indeed true. I was not insane. Far from being selfish, I was the only one who recognized the manipulation for what it was from the very first moment it occurred. At this point, Daniel has also recognized it, and his voice sounded genuinely distressed during our phone conversation. His voice was tense, and for the first time in months, he actually sounded regretful. He expressed his apologies to me, which I genuinely did not anticipate hearing after everything we had gone through together. This time, he did not speak with anger or defensiveness. Instead, he expressed regret. Daniel confessed to me that, prior to uncovering the truth, he had already lent his father some money. As he went on to describe how he had truly believed his father's story, how he thought that he was doing the right thing by supporting what he assumed was a legitimate business venture, I could hear the frustration in his voice. However, he had been deceived. He was greatly shaken after he confronted his father about the matter. He confessed that he had been lied to and felt betrayed, humiliated, and disgusted by the manipulation. He acknowledged that I had been correct all along, that I had noticed the warning signs, that I had safeguarded our money, and that from the very beginning, he should have paid attention to my advice. He spoke in a voice that was hesitant and almost uncertain, as though he was fully aware of the amount of damage that had been done, but was still holding on to the hope that everything could return to the way it was, before he informed me that once he became aware of the extent to which his family had manipulated him, he was unable to continue living with them. The betrayal, the lies, and the fact that his own father had taken advantage of him had all shattered something within him. He confessed that he had come to feel embarrassed because he had given his trust to those individuals without question, and because he had allowed them to persuade him to take a position against me. He went on to say that it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to remain in that house under the same roof as those who had lied to him and coerced him into making the decision to break up his marriage. He no longer desired to be in their company. He longed to return home. However, the situation was not that straightforward for me. I inhaled deeply, allowing his words to fully register. A few months ago, I would have done anything to hear him say this, to hear him acknowledge what he had done, and finally see the truth. But now that the moment was here, I did not experience the sense of relief that I had anticipated. Rather, I felt angry, hurt, and disbelieving. I made sure to let him know the precise nature of the feelings that had been troubling me. I said, "When you walked out of our home to stand by your parents, you broke my trust." It was not simply the fact that he had left. It was everything that accompanied that action. It was the way in which he had disregarded my concerns, the way in which he had permitted his family to insult me repeatedly. He had painted me as the villain in the story simply because I had refused to be taken advantage of. This had made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. He had made it seem as though my opinions didn't matter, as though my financial contributions and sacrifices meant nothing, and now, after months of choosing them over me, after watching me suffer through the humiliation of being called a gold digger and someone who was breaking up the family, he suddenly wanted to come back. I didn't feel as though it was right for him to come back. I made it clear to him that I was not prepared to simply forgive and forget. I informed him that he had made his decision when he decided to leave. At this point, it was my turn to make my decision. Before I could even consider the possibility of allowing him to return to my life, I required some time to process, time to heal, and time to determine whether or not this marriage was still worth saving. Update 5. I have arrived at this conclusion only after a great deal of contemplation and anguish. It has taken months of therapy and relentless discussions with Daniel to finally reach this point. However, I am now certain that our marriage cannot be salvaged. When Daniel first proposed the idea of relocating to our hometown, I did not give my immediate approval. I was still very upset over the way he had treated me. The way he had chosen to support his parents instead of me, permitted them to insult me, and left our home for the sake of proving a point. However, there was still a part of me that held on to the hope that we might be able to repair things. As a result, over the course of the last 3 months, we made an effort to do so. We went to counseling for our marriage. I sat across from him in session after session, laying my heart bare and doing everything I could to make him understand just how much he had hurt me. I told him how his doubts, his blind loyalty to his father, and his total lack of consideration for my feelings had completely destroyed my trust in him. I explained to him how degrading it felt to be branded a gold digger by his family, even though I was the one who was responsible for the majority of our financial obligations. I went on to tell him that things would have to change if we were going to move forward. We were going to have to cut off his family financially. We could no longer serve as their safety net. We could no longer rescue them every time they mismanaged their lives. We were no longer willing to make sacrifices for the benefit of a family that only viewed us as a source of income. It was necessary for us to establish clear boundaries. This meant going low contact, not completely severing ties, but rather creating much-needed distance between ourselves and the manipulative family of Daniel. However, Daniel refused to do so. Despite all of the things that his family did, the lies, the manipulation, and the financial abuse, he still insisted that he could not abandon them. He maintained that it was his responsibility, as the oldest son, to look after them regardless of the circumstances. Even though they had taken advantage of him, even though they had shown disrespect toward me, and even though they had come close to tearing our marriage apart, that was the moment when I reached my limit. At that point, I came to the realization that nothing would ever change. Even if I forgave him at this very moment, this cycle would continue to repeat itself. Daniel would continually give us more, and I would constantly be put at the bottom of the priority list. His family has never once apologized to me for all the terrible things they said to me. I will no longer accept living like this. I will not continue to be a part of a marriage in which my voice is drowned out by the demands of his family. I will not be in a marriage in which I am expected to give up my financial security for the sake of people who do not contribute anything at all. I will not be in a marriage in which I am constantly fighting to be appreciated, respected, and heard. As a result, I have decided to leave. I am choosing to prioritize myself. I have spoken with my lawyer, and I will be filing for divorce. Daniel has made his decision, and now it is my turn to make mine. I will not remain in a relationship in which I am constantly going to be second. I am deserving of more than this. This time, I am putting myself first. While I was on vacation, my family sold my house for $375,000 to save my sister's $210,000 debt. They thought they fixed everything. But I had other plans. My name is Lucas. I am a 28-year-old real estate agent who loves for color-coded calendars and open house suites. The oldest child is the default issue solver, carrying toolkits in his trunk and supplementary contracts in his glove box. If something spills, breaks, or cries in my household, it somehow becomes my responsibility. I wasn't the best child. That was my younger sister, Mia. She represented the tale, the drama, and the fire alarm. I was the fire extinguisher. People believe that becoming an agent entails luxurious kitchens and easy commission checks. It is not. It's 5 a.m. appraisals, basement mold, and clients who fall in love with the wrong property. Still, I enjoyed it. I enjoy placing keys in hands and saying, "Welcome home." Perhaps this is because home was always something I aspired to create for myself. Nobody could take me away from this tranquil, stable location. The night before my vacation, I stood in my living room with bags by the door and a travel pillow wrapped around my neck like a donut. Airbnb tenants had just departed. The cleaners had just finished, and I wandered around the rooms like I normally did. Count the windows, check the locks, and inhale the lemon cleanser. The backyard string lights turned on. Little gold specks on a dark yard. It looked like life. Mind text when you arrive. Mom stated on the phone, clipped and utilitarian. Don't post too often. You know how people get envious of me sitting on a plane for 10 hours. Lucas, that tone. Even though I didn't see her, I could picture the pinched smile. Just take care. I will. And if you speak with the bank, inquire about extending. Mom, I sliced in softly. I'm leaving at 5 a.m. We will chat later. There was a pause. Then she became soft. Have fun, honey. I will. I flew to Maui the next day. My first true trip in 4 years. There are no clients. There are no showings. Number. Can you come over and look at this water spot? My phone slept in airplane mode. I read along the beach. I fell asleep to the sound of waves and awoke early enough to watch the sand transition from gray to gold. A bartender taught me how to properly chop a pineapple. A child questioned whether I was famous because I was wearing sunglasses and walking quickly. I laughed more in 5 days than I did in 5 months. On day 7, I finally switched on my phone at the hotel breakfast, expecting a few texts about mail or shipments. My alerts lined up like a Jenga tower. Mom missed 15 calls. Dad gave me 10. Mia gives it 5. A message preview from Dad. An important update on the house. Call now. I gazed at the television. My heartbeat pounding in my ears. The papaya on my fork spilled on the plate. A server refilled my coffee and said, "Everything okay?" I nodded too soon. I did not call. I scrolled. Text after text, my breathing became tighter, and my stomach turned icy. When I finally hit the green button, Mom answered the first ring. "No, hello. Where are you in Maui?" I said gently. "Why?" she said, breathless and almost thrilled. "We did something for you." "What did you handle?" She stated your house seemed reasonable. It sold. My fork clinked against the plate. "What?" "You're welcome," she said. "You will understand after you hear the figures." I opened and closed my lips, and a youngster at the next table giggled at something his father said, and the sound was so natural and safe that it made my eyes burn. Mom kept speaking. "Don't be so emotional, Lucas. It's finished. Come home." I set the phone down on the tablecloth and watched the waves crash, pull back, then slam again. The noise in my mind changed from a white hiss to a piercing beep. Back home, in a house I'd built piece by piece, something had changed without me. Mia sent a notification. A single line, like a match dropped into gasoline. Finally evened the playing field. "You can always sleep on my couch." I did not react. I finished my coffee. I booked the earliest flight. I packed as my hands shook. And while I was packing my luggage, Dad sent me his last text of the morning, straightforward and proud. "It's tough medicine, son. But this is family. You will thank us." I said nothing. But I grinned a bit at the sink as the Hawaiian sun shone on the faucet, making it shimmer since the house they sold wasn't what they expected. My sister and I grew up in a 3-bedroom ranch that groaned whenever the wind shifted. Mom had a rainy day jar on top of the refrigerator and a scoreboard in her brain. The jar was for emergencies. The scoreboard was for me. "Lucas got all A's," she would say. "Good. That is expected." Mia received a C+. She'd clap as if the lights had just turned back on after a storm. A huge improvement. When I obtained my license, I drove Mia about. SAT tutoring, manicure appointments, and parties at which I waited outside with a fast food Coke while she danced under string lights and emerged smelling like other people's perfume. If I wanted gas money, Dad would reply, "Invest in yourself." If Mia wanted a new phone, Mom would remark, "Well, she needs to feel connected." At 19 I started working as an assistant to an agent called Jared, who wore loafers with small anchors on them. He taught me how to discern roofs from the curb, hear termites in walls, and keep my voice cool when sellers trembled. At 21, I passed my licensure exam on the second try and spent 10 minutes crying alone in my car. Not loud sobbing, just peaceful relief. That first year, I learnt traditional math. 8 showings for a single offer. You may breathe easier with 2 offers for 1 sale and 1 sale for a month. I wore my lone blue suit till the elbows became shiny. I treated clients to coffee that I couldn't afford. When an elderly couple hugged me at the end and said, "We couldn't have done this without you," I believed them. Which kept me going while I ate microwaved rice and eggs for supper. Mia considered taking a cosmetology course, becoming an influencer, and consulting for a friend's business. My parents dubbed it, "finding herself." She found credit instead. By 26, she had a good car, 5 shop cards, and a penchant of posting champagne glasses with phrases like, "Work hard, play harder." I watched the minimum payments grow like vines. Money conversation in our family was always geared toward her. Mom would say, "Just until next month," slipping an envelope across the table. "We cannot let her sink." Dad would add that she has promise. I was part of the plan. Lucas will sort things out. Mom liked to claim he was good with numbers. I was good with numbers. Numbers purchased me what they believed was my home. When the market dropped 2 years ago, investors halted work on a new development near the park. Clean lines, broad wood, and large sliding doors. The developer panicked. I'd been facilitating their sales. I knew their lender. In that terror, I recognized my opportunity. My mentor's voice resonated. Control the asset. Control the result. I founded Willow Pine Holdings, a modest LLC with a $300 capital and a pretty dull operating agreement. Willow Pine signed a master lease on the land with the option to acquire at a certain price. I paid the first and final month's rent, as well as a security deposit from my money, and lawfully Airbnb'd the apartment to visiting nurses and families in between homes. The cash flow was stable. The option allowed me to buy when my finance was ready, or I could assign the contract to a customer for a fee if the market improved. I put my own name nowhere, no matter how casual I seemed. Not because I was hiding, but because I work in real estate and have witnessed family become inventive when they believe they are entitled to your belongings. I informed my parents I was going to remain there. It was simpler than discussing beneficial interests and right-of-buy provisions. I preserved the original documentation in a fireproof box and the scanned versions in an encrypted folder titled Taxes. The deed was not in my name, the lease was not under my name. Even the mailbox had a distinct silver plate that said WPH LLC, and Mia's numbers doubled. The car note is $642. 4 cards worth $17,300, $9,700, and $12,600, total $1,900. Personal loan of $28,000. Then comes the LEAP, an investor course financed at 19.9% APR. Following that came the silent things. She did not pay rent, and did not cancel her lashes. Dinners were charged to cards that smirked back at her in every snap. She texted me at 1 a.m. "Can you spot my $300? It is for a business purpose. I will pay you back on Friday." I saw her twice. She did not repay me either time. I told her no for the third time. She told Mom. Mom said I was harsh. Mia stopped by the property the day before my vacation while I was changing light bulbs. "This place is so you," she remarked, twirling in the kitchen. It was a little dull. "Very neat." "It's a rental," I explained. She grinned. "You always downplay." She leaned against the island. "Do you know what is not boring? Hawaii." "Who are you traveling with?" "Myself." "Lame." She popped her gum. "Could you please Venmo me $600? I'll send it back on Tuesday." "No," I said, "stop asking." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. It must be nice to hoard." I watched her depart and typed in my notes app. "No more loans, no more rescues." I highlighted it. 4 days into my vacation, she shared a story with a drink in the message, celebrating big life moves. I swiped right past it. I did not want to know. My parents did what they normally do when they are worried. They termed it, handling something. Mia's debt had reached $210,000. $210,000. I learned the number later in black and white. At the moment, I just heard worry in my mother's voice as she said, "You'll understand when you hear the numbers." According to messages later shared in the family group chat, here's how it went. Mom, Dad, and Mia met with a cash buyer in a diner. Mom printed a Zillow snapshot of my property and placed it on the table as an offering. The buyer, with a shaved head and a golf shirt, offered to wire the payments within 24 hours if they signed a fast deed and a seller's affidavit. He would take care of the overdue taxes. There were no back taxes, but that was the limit. "Can we do it without Lucas?" Mom asked. "He's unavailable." "Does he own it?" the buyer inquired. "It's his house," Mom stated firmly. Mia inquired about the finder's fee if she assisted him in purchasing a second home. When I read that sentence later, I put down my phone and went down the hallway twice to avoid throwing it. The buyer printed a bargain bin deed form and placed it over a ketchup stain. My mom inscribed my name in wobbly block letters. Dad witnessed. Mia created a boomerang including the sold caption and a confetti present. The transfer arrived in their joint account the next afternoon. $375,000 less a questionable service charge. They spent $210,000 to save Mia. They paid off their automobile. They set aside a portion for a family trip. They gave me some time to recover. That was the part that nearly had me laugh out loud when I read it again. They believed they had addressed an issue, but it was not the one they expected. Because you cannot sell something you do not possess. Because the owner of record was Willow Pine Holdings, LLC, and the falsified signature was not mine. It was nobody's. And since the buyer, he did not purchase anything. He purchased a lawsuit. I returned on a red-eye flight. I sandpapered my jaw tightly. I didn't visit my parents' residence. I went directly to the property. A moving truck was in the driveway. My mother stood in the yard in her church sandals, hands on hips, supervising 2 boys as if she were a foreman rather than someone who had committed 3 distinct felonies in 48 hours. "There he is," she said when she spotted me. Her voice had that sharp edge that comes when she's already certain you're incorrect. "We were worried you'd miss us." "Miss what?" I inquired as I walked by her. The entrance door was propped open with a paint can. The home smelled like Windex and heated drywall. "Closing out," she said. "New owner wants to start renovations immediately." I noticed the new owner standing by the mantel, taking photographs like an influencer. Golf shirts. Same dude. He nodded, confident and bored. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know what I knew. Mia walked out of the kitchen wearing a blessed sweatshirt. She looked me up and down as if I were a visitor who had arrived without wine. "Hi Benny, how was Maui?" "I'm not doing this in the yard," I announced. "Everyone, go to the living room," I urged. Now they followed in the same manner that people do when they believe they still own the story. We sat. Mom crossed her ankles. Dad remained standing, hands in pockets, like he does when he expects to be acknowledged. The purchaser examined his phone. So Mom began cheerfully. "We made a tough call, but family comes first." I took a breath that seemed to decide for itself. "You sold a house that doesn't belong to you." Silence. Mom's grin twitched. "Do not be childish. It is your house. Everyone knows it." "No," I said. "It's a property that my LLC owns under a master lease with a documented option to acquire. The title is clean and my name does not appear anywhere. The deed you signed was not a deed. It's scribbles on paper." The purchaser stopped pretending to scroll. Mia snorted. "Oh my God, Ben. Nobody cares about your little paperwork games." I turned to face her. "Did you pay off your bill over the wire?" Her chin rose. "Yes." "How much?" She blinked. "I don't have to tell you that." "You do?" I spoke quietly. "If you use proceeds from a fraudulent conveyance." Dad moved forward. "Watch your tone." I met his gaze. "No." "What have you just said?" I maintained my voice level. "No." He gazed as if I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. Mom tries again. Voice honeyed. "Lucas. We have saved your credit. We pulled you out from under the mortgage. There was no mortgage," I said. I mentioned there was a choice. There was revenue. And there were renters with reservations through October that you just canceled in a group text as if you were rescheduling brunch. Her mouth opened and closed. The purchaser cleared his throat. "Look, we can unwind this." "You should definitely unwind this," I remarked, turning to face him. "And call your attorney before you record anything because if you cloud my title, I will come for your E&O and I will not settle." His face performed a rapid calculation. He stepped back. "This is a family matter," he murmured faintly before slipping outside to take a call. Mom's eyes became flint. We carried out the necessary actions. Mia was drowning. Mia folded her arms. "I'm not apologizing for not wanting my life destroyed." I rested my hands on my knees so they wouldn't shake. I did not ask for an apology. "I'm setting a boundary." Dad sneered. "Okay, here we go. Therapy talk." I nodded. "Call it what you wish, but listen closely since I'm only saying this once." Everyone became silent in the manner that people do when they hear something strange and strong and suspect it is about them. "This is not about vengeance," I explained. "This is about closure." Mom laughed sharply. "Closure? You are being dramatic." I stood. My legs felt stable. "I have already contacted both the developer and the title firm. We are submitting an affidavit of fraud and a notice of interest to prevent any recording. The wire will be returned by your really helpful new buddy, and the buyer will move on to disturb another family. If the monies are not returned, we will refer the matter to a judge. In any case, you utilized my name in an inappropriate context. That is forgery. That is identity theft. I'm not going to contact the cops today because I don't want to have my mother arrested. I am, however, finished." Mom's voice lowered. "Finished with what?" "Being your plan," I said. "It's your rainy day jar. Being the one who takes from the safe and then expresses gratitude." Mia rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You behave like you're a saint. You hoard money and call that discipline." "I call it rent paid on time," I told myself. "I call it tax filing. I call it not stealing." She blushed. "We didn't." "You did," I said. "And this is the last time." Dad pointed to the door. "You can get out of our family if you're going to talk like that." I nearly grinned. I already did. You don't know what silence is until you shut off a group chat that's been screaming for years. I muted the family thread. I blocked Mia. I placed my folks on delivery mode discreetly. Then I drove to my office, locked the door, and inhaled so deeply that my lungs felt empty. My paralegal buddy Shay greeted me with a legal pad and a highlighter. "Walk me through every step," she requested. "Dates, times, amounts." I laid out everything: lease, option, email, and Airbnb permissions. The buyer's contract appeared to have been taken from a forum and modified in Paint. The bank statement shows the $375,000 sent into my parents' account, then out to 5 other creditors like a fireworks display. We added names, numbers, and arrows until the page resembled a map of a city's veins. That afternoon, we filed 3 documents: a notice of fraud at the recorder's office, a cease and desist letter to the buyer, and a basic boring letter to my parents directing them to maintain records. No threats or exclamation marks. Boring is effective in real estate. The buyer blinked first. He phoned me that night. "We were just trying to help them," he explained, suddenly human and little. "No," I said. "You were trying to make 20 grand flipping a title." He exhaled. "My attorney says I should wire it back," I said. "Then we both forget this ever happened." He did. 2 days later, the recorder rejected his deed. The county marked the lot as an attempted scam. The developer wrote me a 1-line email. Handled. I slept for 8 hours without checking my phone. My folks didn't let go lightly. On Wednesday, Mom made 6 calls. I didn't respond. She left 3 voicemails that sounded like the first, second, and third acts of the same play: guilt, rage, and threat. Voicemail 1. "You're misunderstood. We did it for you. Please call me back so we can solve it." Voicemail 2. "I spoke with our pastor. He accuses you of bragging. Lucas, this is not who you are." The third voicemail: "If you don't talk to us, we're going to tell people what really happened." I listened to them once. Then I saved them to the documentation folder and went for a stroll. Mia shared a story with a boomerang of herself tossing her hair and the phrase, "Haters gonna hate." Someone DM'd it to me with the message, "Your sister okay?" I typed and deleted 5 drafts. I decided on yes, and placed my phone face down. On Friday, Dad showed up to my office without an appointment and told my receptionist he was come to help his kid. Shay stopped him at the entrance, like a kindly bouncer. "I need to speak with Lucas," he said. Shay grinned. "He's not available." He attempted to push past. She lifted her eyebrow. He paused. "Sir?" she said gently. "We've been put on notice regarding a fraud case. To safeguard everyone, please put whatever you wish to say in writing." He blinked as if the term fraud had a flavor. He departed. That weekend, I drove back to the house and sat on the floor of the empty living room. The string lights buzzed outside. The room had that post-cleaning fragrance of lemon and soap. In my mind, I saw it. Couch here, table there, a plant that would eventually die but looked wonderful for 5 months. I could purchase it right now if I wanted. The financing was clean. My agent's brain generated a list of rates and terms. My heart said, not yet. On Monday, Mom texted me a paragraph that began, "We're family," and finished, "You owe us a conversation." I responded with a single sentence. "Everything you need to know is in the letter." 2 hours later, she wrote, "We were scared." I gazed at the 3 words until they blurred. I typed, erased, typed, deleted. Finally I typed, "I know," and put my phone aside before adding anything further. For a month, the texts arrived in waves, 17 in 1 day, none for 3 days, and 8 in 2 hours. My cousin Jacob showed me a screenshot of the family group in which Mia referred to me as a landlord leech. And Mom stated that Lucas is allowing people to stay in his home for money while his sister suffocates. Aunt Robin said, "But he has so much. He could spare a little." I did not defend myself. I did not send PDFs. I did not post receipts. I watered the plan on my desk. I addressed the client's inquiries. I presented a 2-bedroom apartment to a nurse who had worked nights for 9 years and sobbed when she saw the balcony, which faced east and she hadn't seen a dawn in decades. I handed her the keys and said, "Welcome home." That felt like fresh air. Then came the night, and everything came into perspective. Sunday supper. I hadn't been for months, but Dad contacted me at 3:14 p.m. "We'll eat at 6. You should be here." There was no inquiry, no apology, just an order. I went, not to fight, but to end things. When I came in, the table was arranged like a magazine photo. Roast chicken, baby's breath in a mason jar, and nice plates. Mia scrolled to the end of the table like a bored princess. Mom looked up with a forced smile. Dad poured himself water as though it were brandy. "Lucas," he said. "Good. Sit." I sat. No small talk. "There's no weather." Mom dived straight in. "We've been thinking of a plan." I could feel something in me smile before my mouth did. Of course they did. "We understood," Mom said, "that we were a touch hasty, but the bills are real. Mia's flat is too pricey, yet she is unable to relocate due to her contract. So we need you both." I raised a hand. "Stop." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I held my voice steady. "There is no plan. Not with me in it." Dad slapped his palm upon the table. The plates leaped. "You watch your mouth in my house." I looked at him and talked calmly, like I do when a client is ready to make a bad mistake. "I will speak to you as an adult because that is who I am. I am not sponsoring Mia's life. I am not signing anything. I am not co-signing anything. I am not selling anything. I am not relocating anyone into any of my properties. I am not going to any gathering where I am outvoted 3-1 and told it is love." Mia sneered. "Are you just going to let your sister drown?" "She's not drowning," I explained. "She's swimming in a pool she can't afford and yelling at the lifeguard." Mom's voice became thin. "How dare you?" "Easily," I said. "Because I tried to be kind. I tried being silent. I tried offering modest sums, but it just drew me more into your mess. So now I'm testing the boundaries." Dad leaned forwards. "You're ungrateful." "For what?" I asked. "For many years I drove her. For many years, I was urged to be the larger guy. For the house you attempted to sell but did not own." Mom's eyes blazed. "We were saving you." I stared at them both, then at Mia, who had become extremely motionless, her phone facing down like a small black mirror. "You weren't saving me," I explained. "You were erasing me." Nobody spoke. The clock ticked loudly. I pushed back my chair. "I'm done for the night." I stood and then hesitated. "I will always respond if someone is sick or there is a genuine emergency, but I am not your emergency fund." "Not anymore," Mia snapped. "Are you simply going to walk away?" "Yes," I answered simply. "From this." I left. The door clicked behind me. Outside, the air felt like water. When I got into my car, my phone buzzed twice. 2, 3, and 5 calls. I watched the counter rise to 14, 21, and then 33. I switched the phone over with the light facing down and drove home in the dark. I slept. In the morning, I brewed coffee and listened to the silence. There are no texts yet. Then, at 8:07, someone came through. "For Mom, I do not recognize you." I put the phone down and grinned. "Me neither," I stated aloud as I took the first drink. After 3 months, the sounds faded. Mom sent forgiveness articles. I do not reply. Our entire script fits on one line. "I adore you. I am not financing you." Dad is generally quiet. When he inquired about pricing, I responded as I would to any other client. Mia relaunched as accountability, ripped a card on camera and texted, "Are we okay?" I said, "We're adults." I took advantage of the choice and purchased the house for peace rather than retaliation. It was furnished slowly. 1 chair, 1 lamp, and 1 rule. Nothing I will apologize for. Some nights I sit under the string lights thinking, this is mine. Not the walls, but the calm. People want handcuffs, I want boundaries. Charity trumps lashes. Holiday card. No dinner. No, we will not waive inspection. I missed Mom's call without experiencing a gut drop. Love the state. The fee has changed. For years, the bill included my name whether I had ordered or not. I put down the pen. At the end, a teacher wept into my shoulder. "Didn't think I'd ever get here." "I know," I said. That night, I ate alone, my phone face down, and listened to the yard hum. In the morning, coffee, shower, shoes on the porch, Mom's voicemail, lasagna on her steps, no conversation. I did not go. I purchased a piece in the park. Simple. Mine. Closure isn't a given. It's time to choose who lives next door. I'm Lucas. I work hard. I love my family. I do not pay their expenses. If this makes me the villain, that's okay. I have a life to live. My mother left me dying in the ER for a spa day. I am busy. If she dies, call me. 20 days later, I awoke to a new legal guardian. When I was 18, I was involved in a terrible accident on Interstate 45 while returning home from a large Easter family celebration in Charleston. According to the doctor, I would not survive if I did not have emergency surgery within an hour. That afternoon, my mother and my younger sister were at a fancy spa. My mother said, "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know later. We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not signing anything right now." When the hospital put her on speaker. I'm Maya Johnson, and I'm currently 21 years old. When I eventually opened my eyes 20 days later, the chart at the foot of my bed had been subtly modified. My mother was no longer identified as my legal guardian. Instead, there was another person's name. If you want to know exactly who stepped up when my own mother left, hit the subscribe button. The story only gets more bizarre from here. The new guardian's words were, "If you've ever watched the people who are supposed to love you the most turn their backs the second you needed them, drop the words. I've seen it in the comments, so I know I'm not the only one. Allow me to take you back to the beginning. Just outside of Charleston, on James Island, I grew up in a large white mansion. I was 8 when my father passed away from leukemia. He was teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway one week, and then he was gone. Only my mom's father, John Marshall, continued to attend every weekend after the funeral. He was the former police chief who never truly retired, and everyone in the county knew him. He just exchanged the insignia for a porch swing and a fishing rod. I would sit in the front seat while he told me stories of pursuing bootleggers down rural roads. He would pull up in his old Ford truck, bring me shrimp and grits from his favorite location on Shem Creek. He wasn't Grandpa John to me. Grandpa, the only adult who never canceled, was just Grandpa. For over a year, my mother, Rebecca Turner, was in mourning. Then, at a downtown charity event, she ran into Ethan Cooper. Ethan drove a black Range Rover that always smelled like fresh leather and owned half of the new building on Kiwa Island. I hardly recall the beachside ceremony where they were wedded 2 years later. Lily, who was blonde, boisterous and immediately the focus of the universe, arrived 9 months later. The house suddenly had a nanny, a nursery, and a whole new set of regulations. In order to give Lily the larger room with the balcony, my bedroom was moved to the back corner over the garage. My soccer medals vanished into crates. Instead of calling me by name, my mother began referring to me as my older daughter, as if I were an extra in someone else's family portrait. When I turned 14, I was essentially unnoticeable. Ethan never gave me a glance until I was in his path, yet he paid for everything. Every season Lily received new outfits. I was given uniforms from a private school that I never even went to. Grandpa's modest brick home in West Ashley, which is 30 minutes across the Ravenel Bridge, was the only place I still felt wanted. He kept the freezer full of popsicles, stored my old bike in his garage, and never once inquired as to why I spent every weekend I had spare time there. When I was 18, Easter weekend was meant to be different. Grandpa hosted his yearly barbecue. Deviled eggs, sweet tea in mason jars, low country boil, and 3 long tables beneath the live oaks. Flying in were cousins I hadn't seen in years. Children were running around, there was music, and the air smelled of charcoal. Grandpa said the pale yellow sundress he got me the previous month matched my eyes, so I wore it. It was almost like the good old days for a few hours, as if I might still fit in somewhere. Then, by the dessert table, I heard my mother talking on the phone. Telling someone that she and Lily had scheduled a mother-daughter spa day for the next morning, she laughed. Massages, facials, the full thing. The 3 of them, her, Ethan and Lily, were then on a plane to the Bahamas for spring break. My name was mentioned. I felt a plate of banana pudding grow chilly in my palms as I stood there. I informed Grandpa that I had to go early because I had a headache. He made an effort to argue, but I could tell he was having trouble. But all I wanted was to get out. After helping me purchase a 2002 Jeep Wrangler with my summer lifeguard funds, he gave me the keys. I said, "Drive careful, baby girl, text me when you get there." By the time I reached I-45 westbound, it was already becoming dark. As they do under the low country skies, a spring rolled in quickly, became green, with sheets of rain falling. Even with the windshield wipers operating at full speed, the battle is still lost. Traffic became sluggish. To stay awake, I turned up the radio. Grandpa had a favorite old country tune. Headlights merged into red and white striations. And it wasn't until it was too late that I noticed the tractor trailer. At least 60 miles per hour, the driver jackknifed across 3 lanes, hydroplaned, and crashed into the driver's side of my Jeep. Metal let out a cry. The glass burst. The planet fell to a stop upside down against the median after flipping twice and ceiling caving in. I recall the crash's abrupt quiet, the taste of blood, the seatbelt slicing into my shoulder, and then nothing at all. I heard sirens yelling at me from a distance. The MUSC emergency room was a complete mess. Codes were screamed by doctors. The monitors cried out. For more O negative, someone continued shouting. I was immediately wheeled into Trauma Bay 1. In a matter of seconds, my clothing were severed. I had tubes down my neck and needles in both arms. My pelvis was shattered, spleen ruptured, bleeding inside my skull, and I had less than an hour before things went irreversible, a surgeon in blood-stained scrubs stated, leaning over me. They needed parental consent to take me to the O right now. A compassionate nurse took my phone, navigated to Mom, and pressed FaceTime. On the third ring, the call was connected. I could hear the soft hum of massage chairs and spa music. With cucumber slices covering her eyes and the sheet mask still on, my mother's face materialized. With her earbuds in, Lily was spread out on the table next her, surfing through TikTok. Mrs. Cooper, this is Alvarez from MUSC Trauma, she began, tilting the camera so Rebecca could see the ventilator tube and my blood-covered face. Your daughter has been in a severe accident. She has life-threatening injuries and requires immediate surgery. We need verbal consent now or she may not survive the next hour. Squinting at the television, Rebecca pulled off a slice of cucumber. Lily leaned over to have a look and took out an earpiece. The physician intervened. Rebecca sighed as if someone had just asked her to move her car. Ma'am, we're looking at multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible brain swelling. We have to open her up immediately. If she doesn't make it, just give me a call when it's over, she replied in a monotone voice. Lily laughed sharply, stopped talking, and took a snapshot of my bruised face on the gurney. We're in the middle of a treatment and I'm not driving all the way downtown to sign papers. Her thumbs flew over the screen as I watched. I would later find out that the caption she sent to her group chat was a welcome change of pace. The phone was shaking in the nurse's palm. The nurse tried again, and a doctor behind her mumbled. Jesus Christ. Another whispered. Get that recorded. Ma'am, this is a legal requirement for a minor. I heard you, Rebecca cut in. Call my father, John Marshall. He'll handle it. We paid for a full day here. She ended the conversation. The trauma team gazed at the screen that was blank. One of the residents appeared to be about to hurl the phone across the room. Grandpa was the next emergency contact they scrolled to. When the hospital arrived, he was already driving his old Ford pickup. He had been cleaning shrimp for dinner tomorrow while sitting on his patio. Still wearing rubber boots and an apron smeared with fish blood, he dropped everything and floored it across the Ashley River Bridge as soon as he heard Maya and Critical. The rain beat down on the windshield. The sky was illuminated by lightning. In 20 minutes, he completed the 30-minute drive. Wet to the bone, with his 32-year-old badge still fastened to his belt out of habit, he bounded through the emergency room doors. After giving the retiring chief a quick glance, the charge nurse waved him through. His hand trembled so much that the pen scratched the paper as he signed each consent document they thrust in front of him without even reading a line. He was allowed to stay in the bay long enough to see me, with tubes all over the place and a face so bloated that it was unrecognizable. The same phrase he used to say to me when I had nightmares as a child was uttered by him as he leaned near to my ear. They hurried me to the operating room after saying, "I've got you, baby girl. Grandpa's right here." Outside the operating room, he dragged a metal chair up to the glass wall and took a seat. For the following 10 hours he remained still. Not when coffee was provided by the nurses. When the waiting room was empty. No. Not when the backup generators started up and the power was cut off for 14 minutes due to the storm outside. Just before dawn, he accompanied the bed as they rolled me to the intensive care unit, still clutching the same icy hand that had gone slack hours before. The next 20 days turned out to be Grandpa's longest. The ICU smelled of fear and antiseptic. The rhythm of the machine's hissing and beeping made it impossible to forget how thin the line was. Grandpa refused to get out of the vinyl recliner next to my bed. On the first night, nurses attempted to send him home. No one argued once he simply handed them the old badge that was still in his wallet and declared, "I'm not going anywhere." He slept with his boots on, his head tilted back, and his mouth wide for 30 minutes at a time. In order to avoid being drowned out by the monitors, he spoke to me quietly and continuously when he woke up. He told me about the night I was born and how, because my mother was too tired, he held me first. He recounted how I screamed until he allowed me to reel it in myself, and how we caught a 6-foot shark off Folly Beach Pier when I was 8 years old. From the battered edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, he read aloud. He performed all the voices while keeping it in the truck. On certain nights he would just hum the ancient hymn that his own mother used to sing when he was a child, and that always put me to sleep on his couch. Physicians came and went. My brain swelled less, the neurologist said one morning. The orthopedic physician cautioned that the pelvis might never mend properly one more afternoon. Grandpa listened, nodded, and asked pointed questions that made the locals perspire before returning to holding my hand as if nothing had changed. The numbers eventually began to move in the correct direction on day 18. My blood pressure became stable. The ventilator's settings fell. Grandpa was seen grinning by a nurse for the first time in 3 weeks. A tall man in a navy suit showed up at the glass door that same day as he leaned in and whispered that the redfish were rushing and we would go fishing as soon as I woke up. 28 years ago, Mr. Donovan had worked cases with Grandpa. Once a month they continued to play poker. Grandpa glanced up at Donovan's folder and nodded slowly. Words are not necessary. After leaving the hospital, Donovan hopped in his silver Lexus and headed directly to James Island. He had memorized the address. In the entryway, surrounded by high-end baggage, stood Rebecca and Lily. With their tags already on, 2 identical pink luggage were waiting by the door for a 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise that would depart Charleston Harbor early the following day. Ethan was on a work call upstairs. For Instagram, Lily was recording herself spinning about in a brand new sundress. Rebecca was going over passports again. The doorbell rang. After introducing himself, Donovan gave Rebecca the large envelope and watched as she tore it open. 2 sets of papers were within. A civil claim brought by the hospital for extraordinary life-saving costs plus pain and suffering, as well as an emergency petition to revoke parental rights for medical neglect of a minor. Lily, who was 14 at the time and had actively engaged in the rejection, was also called Rebecca Turner. The spray tan turned Rebecca's face white. Mid-spin, Lily stopped recording. "You have 80 hours to respond," Donovan stated in a composed tone. Rebecca began to rant about attorneys, blunders, and how dare anyone question her parenting, saying, "After that, the judge has already agreed to an emergency hearing." Lily broke down in tears, saying the texts had no meaning for her. Donovan just turned and headed back to his vehicle. Rebecca gripped the papers as she slid down the wall of the home, mascara streaming down her face in black streams. Lily would not stop yelling that her spring break will be ruined. After coming downstairs and glancing at the papers, Ethan turned pale. Grandpa never spoke of the guest back at the hospital. Humming the same old hymn, he continued to grasp my hand while he waited for my eyes to open. I opened my eyes for the first time 3 days later. Everything was painful. I tasted plastic and metal in my mouth. The machines continued to beep, but now they did so more softly. Grandpa's red-rimmed, unshaven eyes were the first face I saw, and they were smiling. His cheeks were so big that I believed they might split. "Hey, baby girl," he said in a crackly murmur. "Welcome back," I attempted to say. A rasp was the only sound that emerged. Before he raised the whiteboard at the foot of the bed for me to read, he hit the call button. "Legal guardian John Marshall," was written in large bold characters in black marker, and I looked until the words became hazy. Tears rolled into my ears from the side. With a thumb that still had a subtle shrimp and salt air scent, he wiped them away. He told me everything over the following few hours while physicians shone lights in my eyes and nurses checked vital signs. My mother used the exact phrase, "the FaceTime call." Lily's screen grab. I lay unconscious while the paper served. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't. I sobbed once more intensely this time. Not from suffering, but from such profound relief that it was like drowning in reverse. They allowed me to return home after 3 weeks. Grandpa's small gray home on stilts on Folly Beach, 20 minutes south of the city, is the destination, not James Island. The moment he carried me over the threshold, the sea air filled my lungs. His fishing tackle room used to be my new bedroom. He had hung the identical wind chimes we had crafted when I was 9 years old and painted the walls a light blue. I could see the ocean rolling steadily and endlessly beyond the window. The next Monday, physical therapy began. Grandpa saw me like I was 2 years old again as I learned to sit up, stand, and finally shuffle behind a walker. Because shrimp and grits were soft enough for my wired jaw, he prepared them every night. With his arm around my shoulders, we sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset. There was no need for any of us to break the silence. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter one day. Mom appeared on the screen. I gazed at it for 12 rings. Grandpa remained silent as he observed from the doorway. I hit the decline button, put the phone down, and returned to the porch. She never tried again after that. The same week, Ethan filed for divorce across town. The Port Authority had recently awarded his company a huge contract. He didn't need to be associated with child-abandoning headlines. Taking only his clothing and the golf clubs, he left the house on James Island before the ink dried. After losing her mind on social media for around 4 days, Lily became completely silent as scholarship offers from colleges began to come in. Grandpa didn't mention it until I asked him. He gave me a direct response when I did. They made their choice, Ren. Now we make ours. On several nights, I woke up screaming from the anguish. Wearing old police academy sweat, he would stumble in, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until the medication took effect. On other evenings, I woke up to the sound of him praying aloud in the living room in a harsh voice, pleading with God to grant him enough years to see me completely restored. I was able to walk the entire length of the pier without stopping once the stitches were removed, and the casts were replaced with braces. Grandpa purchased a bucket of shrimp and 2 rods. We sat where the water becomes deep green, and although the lines in the water didn't catch much, we didn't care. The rest of the hospital odor was burnt off my skin by the sun. One evening when the wind blew my hair across my face, I glanced out to the horizon and knew I had stopped waiting for anything. No second opportunity, no explanation, no apologies. I had no desire to give. As usual, the ocean continued to move. The day of the preliminary hearing came a few months later. The Broad Street courthouse smelled of floor polish and old wood. Grandpa on one side and Donovan on the other. I entered using crutches. In a navy suit that was 2 sizes too big, my mother sat at the defendant's table without makeup and with puffed eyes. Beside her, Lily slouched in a blazer from a private school and gazed at the ground. The judge was a steel gray-haired woman who had no patience. After adjusting her glasses, she instructed the bailiff to roll the tape. The large screen displayed the FaceTime conversation. On the gurney, my fractured body. The background music is spa music. My mom's voice was chilly and clear. If she doesn't make it, just call me when it's over. The laughter of Lily. The screen grab. Showed my face covered in blood, along with her caption. There was complete silence in the courtroom. In fact, a juror in the rear gasped. Next, Donovan placed the phone logs on the bench. Within 5 minutes, Lily had sent the picture to 8 other group chats. The judge's pen stopped flowing when one message said, "One less person stealing my spring break." She gave my mother a long, painful look. "Mrs. Turner," she uttered in an icy voice. In 28 years on this bench, I have never heard a parent speak about their child this way. While that child was fighting for her life, temporary full custody is immediately transferred to John Marshall, effective today. We'll see you back here for the permanent hearing. She struck the gavel with such force that it reverberated across the marble. Rebecca was let off from her position at the South Carolina State Credit Union 3 days later. Everyone who handles federal funding must undergo a background check. A minor who is medically neglected is automatically disqualified. Using a cardboard box, security let her out. The same week, Lily's full-ride academic scholarship at the College of Charleston was canceled. The admissions board pointed to behavior that was inconsistent with the school's principles. All of a sudden, the private high school that had always revered her began to murmur behind her back. The James Island home entered foreclosure within a month. The deed already had Ethan's name on it. In order to safeguard his assets, he had signed everything over. Off Savannah Highway, mother and daughter moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a malfunctioning elevator and peeling paint. Lily's automobile was lost. To pay her rent, Rebecca found a night job at a supermarket shop stocking shelves. I began going to actual therapy in the interim. I was picked up by a van twice a week for outpatient physical rehabilitation at MUSC. I regained my ability to climb stairs, balance on a Bosu ball, and have faith in my own legs. Every single time, Grandpa took me to the car and waited in the lobby, reading the same 3 fishing magazines, until I emerged, trembling and sweaty. I saw Dr. Rivera, a trauma psychotherapist, on Thursdays. We discussed nightmares, anger, and the day I decided I would never want to hear my mother's voice again while sitting in a tiny lavender-scented office. Without ever grumbling about the heat, Grandpa waited in the truck with the windows down and the country station turned down. On other afternoons, when the agony in my hips became unbearable, I would sit on the back deck and feed the German Shepherd bits of bread. Grandpa and I would watch the tide go out while sipping 2 sweet teas. He never made an effort to calm my rage. He simply allowed me to sense it. I could use a cane instead of crutches by the end of the summer, and then the cane for nothing at all. Although I still had a little limp, The doctor predicted that it would mostly go away by the time I was 18. I went all the way to the end of Folly Pier and returned one evening without stopping. Despite the fact that the sun had not yet set, Grandpa met me halfway with a lantern and a blanket. We took off our shoes and relaxed on the sand, allowing the waves to lick our toes. My head was resting on his shoulder. I said, "Thank you for staying." He gave me a kiss on top of my head. "Nowhere else I'd rather be, baby girl." The last trial day arrived 8 months after the crash. I entered the courtroom without a limp, crutches, or cane. My head was raised, but the scar on my forehead remained pink. In his Sunday suit, which he wore to my dad's burial, Grandpa sat directly behind me. With her hair tied back tightly and a tissue she never used in her hand, Rebecca appeared smaller than I remembered. Lily crossed her arms so tightly that her knuckles turned white as she gazed straight ahead. I was called to the stand first by Donovan. I sat down, swore, and met the judge's gaze. I inhaled. "Tell the court how it felt," he explained, "knowing your mother refused to come while you were dying." The chamber awaited. "It felt like the last piece of me that still believed I mattered just died on that table," I stated. My voice remained steady. One sentence told me I was disposable. The same woman who used to read me bedtime stories was the one who said it. I informed them about seeing Grandpa's name on the Guardian line when I woke up. Regarding the one missed call that I never answered. Almost every night, rather of pondering why I wasn't enough, I dozed off while listening to the water. Rebecca's attorney attempted to portray her as anxious, overburdened, and a victim of her situation. He mentioned her divorce, foreclosure, and loss of employment. I never gave her a glance. The judge asked me if I had anything further to say once he was done. "Yes, Your Honor," was my response. "I don't want her money. I don't want her apologies. I just want this to be over." The judge didn't take long to say, "I already have a family." After 25 minutes she came back. Permanent termination of parental rights for Rebecca Turner effective immediately. Civil judgment in favor of the plaintiff and the hospital. $500,000. The James Island property will be sold at auction to satisfy the lien. Mr. John Marshall is granted full legal adoption. This case is closed. The gavel snapped like a gunshot. Questions were yelled by reporters in the hallway outside. Disregarding everyone, I grabbed Grandpa's arm and ventured out into the October sunshine. The large white mansion was padlocked by the bank 4 weeks later. What little Rebecca and Lily chose to keep was taken by a moving truck. They packed items into an ancient automobile and proceeded north on I-45 to a less expensive place where no one knew them. I never inquired as to where. The adoption documents came in the mail the same month. I wept more than the day I awoke from the coma when I signed Maya Marshall for the first time. My dad's old service photo is next to the certificate that Grandpa framed over the fireplace. 12 minutes from Folly Beach, I began my final year at an alternative school. No one knew the story unless I told them. The courses were small and the teachers genuinely cared. I received early decision admission to the College of Charleston, which is close enough for me to return home every night if I so desired, and I made the honor roll each quarter. It was windy and warm on graduation day. The pale blue gown and cap I wore matched the hue of the walls in my bedroom, which Grandpa had painted for me. Everyone in the senior class knew by that point who had gotten me through, so when they called my name, they all stood up and cheered. Grandpa was waiting in his dress uniform at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes bright and his medals polished. I sprinted over to him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and allowed him to hoist me off the ground as if I were still weightless. That Easter Sunday was 6 years ago. Now that I'm 21, I work as a family trauma counselor at a nonprofit organization in Mount Pleasant, with my psychology degree hanging on the wall. Teenagers who think no one will ever choose them sit across from me every day, and I get to tell them they're mistaken because someone picked me when the ones who were meant to love me the most turned their backs on me. Last month was Grandpa's 77th birthday. He continues to mow the yard by himself. Still produces the greatest shrimp and grits in the state and catches more fish than any charter boat skipper on the island. It's always half full in the house on stilts with its creaky coffee pot, singing porch swing, and wind chimes. It's still light blue in my previous room. Neither of us ever converted his tackle room back to a bedroom, so it remains that way. Most nights, we watch dolphins chasing mullet in the surf while we have dinner on the deck. He refers to me as baby girl, precisely once per day, usually while passing me a cup of sweet tea. I still refer to him as Grandpa. There's nothing else that seems right. 4 years ago, Rebecca and Lily permanently left South Carolina. When I last heard from them, they were renting a trailer under different last names someplace in Georgia. I never looked for them. They never looked for me. The quiet is pure. It's the end. There is peace. I get asked if I'm upset. I'm not. Anger consumes energy, which I have chosen to use for living. Some people inquire about my forgiveness. I don't have the right to forgive. They have the right to earn it, but they have never done so. I'm just finished. I do have such a profound sense of thankfulness that it still surprises me. Thank you to the man who spent 20 nights sleeping in a vinyl chair. For the retired chief who never skipped a counseling session. For the grandfather who made his heart a harbor and his house a home. Those who are your blood relatives are not your family. When your blood runs cold on an operating table, family is the one who stays with you. Family members are the ones that hold your hand, sign documents, and never once make you feel like a burden. You don't have that person, so try harder if you're watching this and feeling afraid. They exist. They can occasionally be the unexpected grandma you need. They can be the neighbor who won't go, the friend, or the teacher. And hang on when you find them. Therefore, true families are not created. It is selected each and every day. Particularly on the days when it costs them everything to choose you. That is the only certain truth I am aware of. That concludes my tale.